And we have our trusty flag. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right, get our flag up here. I had the flag. I apologize. I mean,
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was waiting for the flag.
Yeah, I had clicked on the wrong thing. I had the wrong file up, so I had to change the file before I could get the flag up there.
So next is roll call, please.
Squattrito,
Here.
Webster,
Here.
Fuller,
Here.
Darren,
Here.
Shingles, Buckley,
Here.
Daring,
Here.
LaBelle, and Cody, we heard will be late.
Okay. And then with us are Nanny, Gallané, Loveberry, and Duzen. So we last met for a regular meeting on June 16th. And so you have the minutes of that June 16th meeting in your packet. Are there any corrections to the June 16th minutes that anyone has?
I would move to approve the minutes of June 16th.
Okay, there's a motion by Webster to approve the minutes from June 16th as prepared. Any second? Second by Darren. Further discussion? And let the record show that LaBelle is here now. If not, then I'll just ask for a voice vote. All in favor of approving the minutes as prepared, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so we'll consider those minutes to be approved. Next item is correspondence, board reports, and presentations. Is there any correspondence unrelated to agenda items tonight? Hearing none. Board reports now. Lisa's not here yet, so I guess we'll defer on the Board of Trustees report. Anything from ZBA? I don't know that you guys have met since we last met.
Nothing new from ZBA. We haven't met. It's been in a couple of months now. Yeah.
Okay. Sidewalks and pathways, did you guys meet?
Yes, we did meet. We have developed and had a good meeting. Absolutely wonderful meeting. We developed some priorities in regards to sidewalks, which I believe we're going to take to the Board of Trustees. I'll have to defer to Rodney and Peter in regards to when that's going to become forward.
These going to be these priorities are going to be included as part of the fiscal year 2021 budget presentation. So they'll be incorporated into that budget proposal.
Wonderful. And then we did have a resignation of one of our members, Sherry Teal, so that we will need to request applications of interested personnel who might be interested in being on our committee. And then our next meeting is in October.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Denise for the Sidewalks and Pathways Committee? All right, let the record also show that Shingles has joined us. And will the township office automatically solicit those applications, or is there anything we need to do with that?
That's a good question. Sherry hasn't, I mean, Sherry did indicate that she is going to resign. She actually is going to put together a letter to you, Phil, which we'll have for the next meeting. She hasn't done that yet. At this point, she has not officially resigned until you accept her resignation letter. So we'll have that for the next meeting. But yes, we can proceed with offering the opportunity for people to be a part of that committee.
Okay, good, thank you.
And also realizing that if I leave, if and when I leave the township, that the planning commission will need to appoint a member, as well as if Connie Bills becomes a member of the board of trustees. I don't know whether that would then negate her also membership on the sidewalk and pathways committee. So there may be some things here in the future that the planning commission will need to address in regard to looking at that committee.
Thanks for that. We're on it. We'll be on it. Anything else in the way of reports or presentations? Hearing none, we'll move on. Next item is approval of agenda. So we have a pretty full agenda tonight. It's got 5 business items on it. There are some public hearings and a couple of, actually about 3 site plans, 2 site plans, no 3. Any additions or changes to the agenda that anyone has?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion by Webster, second by Fuller, to approve the agenda as prepared. Further discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll consider the agenda approved. Next item is public comment. So we've got several public hearings tonight. Public comment for us is a time set aside at the front end of our meeting for individuals who want to address the Planning Commission on items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if anyone is here to make public comments during the public hearings, they would wait for those. So what I would ask then would be for any of the attendees who want to make a public comment on an item that's not on tonight's agenda, hit the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen there to be recognized, and we'll give you an opportunity to make your public comment. So regular public comment is open at 7:10. Not seeing any. I am going to assume that our folks are here to comment on other things, and so.
Phil, before you leave that, we have somebody who phoned in, and I don't recognize the phone number. I'm wondering if it might actually be Lisa Cody. So if it's all right, I'm going to allow that the person to talk or to unmute them and see if this is Lisa. It's the phone number that ends in 747.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've unmuted the person with the phone number that ends in 747, and we just ask if you can tell us who this is.
This is Carmelina from the Home Builders Association.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. If you have any comments, you're welcome to make them, but I just want to make sure it wasn't one of our Planning Commission members.
No, not a problem. Just listening.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. So, so seeing no public comments, people wanting to make a public comment at this time, we'll go ahead and close up the general public comment, and we'll have extended public comment later in the meeting. So at this time, we're ready to move on to the new business items. So taking them in order, the first new business item is the presentation of the zoning ordinance update, P-Text 20-02. This will include a public hearing. So at this point, I will turn it over to Rodney for an introduction, then we'll move on to the public hearing, and then we'll continue from there.
Thank you very much. This is, as was said, this is an item a public hearing for our proposed zoning ordinance update. This is a project that has been going on for some time now. It's a follow-up to the Township's Master Plan project, which was completed in 2018. And there was recognition that there was a need to update our zoning ordinance, which dates back in some elements to the 1980s, and certainly meant much to the 1990s. Over the course of more than a year, you as a planning commission, township staff, and our consultant, Mr. Duzen, who's with us, have put many hours in to review the existing zoning ordinance and to look at draft ordinance language and to consider different policy choices related to zoning regulations. The document that you have before you, which has been available for township review or public review since March, is the result of all that work. It is a document that meets all the requirements of the State Zoning Act and is up to date with case law and other requirements that apply to our zoning ordinance. It is also a document that has been substantially reorganized to make it easier to find information. Many requirements, standards have been put into tables. Many illustrations have been added, all in an effort to make this document as readable and as easy to understand and navigate as possible. We've also, as part of this update, have substantially revised review and approval procedures for special use permits, site plan review, plan unit developments, and also rezoning activity to again to streamline wherever possible, but also to ensure that projects that are coming in before you receive the necessary review to ensure that they comply with the ordinance requirements, but also that we're not taking unnecessary time, that we proceed forward in as quick a fashion as we can while ensuring that the project meets our requirements. One of the key updates is the plan unit development section, which is an optional form of development review that is a tool that is very useful for implementing the township's master plan, especially for the bluegrass area. So we hope that developers will see the benefit of making use of that option and the flexibility that's built into it. We also updated in this ordinance many of the site development standards, including landscaping and screening, as well as fences, lighting, and other site design elements that will ensure we have projects that come into the community and improvements to existing sites that are benefit to the township. Overall, with this document, as I said, it meets all the requirements that apply, but it is also a document that will be, I believe, from my perspective as a professional, a benefit to the community. This is a document that will help us implement the master plan, help all of us make the best decisions possible for the future of this community, and ensure that the community is protected as projects come in from potential challenges that can come up when you don't have regulations in place to handle the more controversial issues. The document is flexible, but it is also comprehensive and rigorous in terms of the requirements that are necessary for the future of this community. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions as we move through this.
Okay, thank you, Rodney. So we'll move on to the public hearing at this time. The Planning Commission is anxious to hear all the comments that people want to offer. And we want to give everyone who wants to speak an opportunity to speak. So what I'll ask is for anyone who would like to make a public comment, again, hit your raise hand button. I'll recognize you, and then Rodney will, I don't know, are we just unmiking people, or are we moving them over to the big room?
We'll unmic them. I will hit the unmute button and they, allow them to speak. Certainly, if you'd like me to move them to be able to see somebody, I'm happy to do that. But in this process, we would normally just be unmuting them.
Okay, all right. So so again, raise your hand. I'll recognize you, and we'll go from there. We'll give everyone who wants to speak an opportunity to speak. We'd ask you give us your name and address for the minutes, and limit your initial comments anyway to 3 minutes. Once everyone who wants to speak has had an opportunity to speak, we'll recognize individuals who've already spoken for additional comments. So the public hearing on the zoning ordinance update 20-02 is open at 7:17. And I saw Tim Beebe's hand up first, so we'll recognize Tim Beebe.
I've unmuted him. Hang on, I have to ask him to unmute himself, actually. There we
Can
go.
you hear me now?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right. In your packet, I know that Rodney had copied you on some of my questions, comments in the mixed use building section. And I was hoping that as part of your discussion, you could enlighten me on your thoughts on building heights. The current zoning ordinance and the heights that were included in there have been in there a very long time. And from a fire department standpoint, I know before Rodney says anything, that's not all the considerations, but the fire department has the ability to fight fires in much taller buildings. The fire code and the sprinkler sections are requiring more sprinkling in taller buildings. The Holiday Inn that was built here recently, the apartments out on Collegiate Way, those are all examples of structures that are, or developments that are higher than the 35 feet. And I do understand that we can use the planned unit developments for specific projects. Rodney and I have difference of opinion on how easy that is. He's on the review side, I'm on the preparing side. The other thing that I was hoping that we could take a short time to talk about was residential parking on the first floor in the rear, not on facing sides of streets. And then a little more information on the components in item 4 on, it appears that there's nothing worse for a designer than a moving target, because I never know what to shoot for. Item 4 seems to give the ability for either staff or the planning commission to kind of move that target. Well, unfortunately, that target will move then with differing staff, differing planning commission members, and it's always going to be an ongoing thing. So I was just hoping that I'd be able to hear what your thoughts were on those.
So, well, first of all, thanks for the comments, and also thanks for taking the time to write the written summary, which I think we've all read. My understanding of this process is that we're taking comments right now, and once public comment is closed, then we'll move on to our deliberations. So I don't want to get into a kind of a committee of the whole with the public on this, but I'll simply say for myself that I read through what you wrote, and I intend to, I think we want to go through all of those and satisfy ourselves that we're doing the right thing.
Okay. Thank you, Phil.
Was there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
There are on some of the next topics, but I don't think we want to jump into the rezoning maps as of yet.
Oh, no, those are going to be separate hearings. So,
Yep.
All right, thank you. So then I will recognize Andy, and I apologize if I butcher any names, Andy Thyssen.
That's correct. I've asked,
Evening.
here he is.
Andy Tyson, 1520 East Deerfield, current ZBA chair and township resident. I'll keep my comments rather general for now. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. We've recently seen a neighboring municipality here, City of Mount Pleasant, adopt a new zoning ordinance that's been met with quite a lot of pushback from the development community because it's gone a totally different direction, unintentionally restricting development with a lot of regulations that I don't think were completely thought out. And the concern would be well-intentioned efforts of the Planning Commission to maintain a clear path towards the master plan and help further the community sometimes get lost in some of the specific regulations. I wish I could point to one or two of those specific things for you, but as a general contractor, I often don't know the extent of the regulations impact until it's a project specific question. So I could sit and try and pick things apart, but I don't think that's productive. My comment circles back to making sure that the restrictions that we make are in effort to guide us towards the master plan in a productive manner that doesn't restrict development, because I think the township has a great opportunity to capitalize on some of the issues that the City of Mount Pleasant is currently experiencing, where people are struggling to be able to develop within those new parameters. Rodney and I have had some back and forth correspondence about this, and I think, like I said, I think the effort is in the right direction, but we need to be mindful that we're not restricting development unnecessarily. That being said, as a ZBA member, obviously I have concerns about the specific items that are regular occurrences for variance requests, and I've mentioned that I think in the last time the ordinance was brought up on the 30th. I would be curious to see how we're recording those specific lists of those recurring items and for what period of time we were identifying those reoccurring items so that we can see that they are actually specifically tackled in that ordinance. For those of you on the Planning Commission who have sat on the ZBA, you know that sometimes we're put in a very difficult spot, and I see Mike shaking his head because we're kind of the last line of defense there, and some of that stuff that gets forced into interpretation becomes pretty dicey. So the more clear we can be on those items, I think it's critical. And then my last comment is really just kind of a general reminder. Having been president for the local Home Builders Association for several years, I brought this up with the City of Mount Pleasant repeatedly, but it seems to have fallen on deaf ears. Michigan is a single state construction code. So Public Act 230 of 1972, the Style DeRossett Hale Construction Code Act, is the guiding principle for all construction code. And in recent history, we've seen a lot of municipalities lean heavily on the zoning ordinance to almost circumvent that guideline from the state code. And I caution you in doing that. Again, I think it's often done unintentionally, but there can be some real negative repercussions where a zoning ordinance tries to take precedence over the state code that everyone is aware of and required to follow. And so it's a fine line between zoning and construction. I realize they're two separate things, but there is a lot of overlap there. So something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Anyone else who'd like to make a public comment at this time on the new zoning ordinance? Okay, I don't see any other folks raising their hands. I do see Tim has his hand up, so I'll recognize Tim for an additional comment.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. This is probably a question for either Peter or Rodney. After this is enacted, procedurally, is it just like any other time if there's a change to the new zoning ordinance or found to be something that needs to be clarified in it? Is it purely going through like a text amendment like we always have? Is that the procedure? Not just curious on you know, if things are found in the future, what the procedure is to follow.
So are you referring to if an issue is found with the new zoning ordinance and there is a desire to then change or amend it?
Yes.
Yeah, the text amendment process still exists.
Right. Yeah, the process would be the same as what we do now when we're amending an ordinance.
Okay, because as Andy said, as you work through the ordinance and you actually work with the ordinance in project situations, that's when everything's going to get weeded out.
Right.
To sit back and read a text that's over an inch thick and say that, you know, as the public, we've gone through it and we know how this is going to work isn't really realistic. It's going to be kind of a trial and error for a while with the new ordinance, and I'm just wanting to make sure that there's a procedure in order to modify things if they do need to be modified.
Phil, if I may, I could make another comment, but I suspect that Chris Dusen would offer the same idea that I would here, and I wouldn't mind hearing it from Chris. Would it be all right if he responded to that about what working with an ordinance and working with the new ordinance and what
Sure.
what we'd like to be doing?
Well, with any new ordinance, there's going to be some fine tuning that's required over the course of the year. And what my recommendation is that you keep track of any of those items that you think ought to be fine tuned. And then at the end of the year, review those items and take care of those at once as one project. So to speak, and one amendment to the ordinance, and that's worked out fairly well in a lot of other communities, because as Tim mentioned, when you undertake a project of this magnitude, there's bound to be a few things that you think are going to work perfectly well, but when you get out there in the real world and you see how they work on the ground, you may want to fine tune them or make some adjustments. With respect to the amendment process, I should mention that the authority to create a new zoning ordinance and to amend a zoning ordinance is delegated to the township through Michigan Public Act 110 of 2006, the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. And so that act actually has a section in it that sets forth the procedures for amending the zoning ordinance. And we have to follow those procedures. There's no streamlined process that you can avoid going through. Whenever you want to amend the ordinance, you have to follow those procedures.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So once again, people that haven't spoken yet, I'm not seeing any hands up, but well, Andy had his hand up and now he's taken it down. So I don't know if he wants to speak or not. Any more public comments during this public hearing? Okay, I see Andy's hand now, so go ahead and unmute him.
That was just poor timing on my part, Phil. Sorry about that. I thought you were about to tell me I wasn't allowed to speak again.
No.
Yeah, one of the things that I was going to hit up in that the second public comment was what Tim spoke to, and now Chris has elaborated on, but trying to identify a clear triggering mechanism for a change in the ordinance. So that's one of the struggles we've seen with other municipalities, and they're not, townships, as so much as I've referred to the city of Mount Pleasant specifically. There's no clear, definitive path towards what would trigger a change in the ordinance. So, for example, if there were multiple instances, whether that number be 3, 4, or 5 times where the same issue came up, there's no guidelines for what is the correct number of times that something comes up that's in conflict with the ordinance that would prompt a further discussion or the chance to bring that up. And so that was one of the things that I wanted to stress. It sounds like Chris has explained it, how Public Act 110 outlines those procedures in detail. I think that's good. I don't know if there's room for us to identify something, some verbiage in the ordinance in addition to that would help clear that up, or as I think you said, we can't really deviate from that, Chris, but that's one of the things that we want to.
No, you can't deviate, and actually the ordinance does have a section in it that deals with amendments. So it specifically mirrors the regulations that are in the state act with respect to amendments, and it embellishes on them a little bit to explain the process in greater detail than the state act does. The state act is, as you might imagine, full of legalese, and we've tried to eliminate the legalese to the extent that we can in the new ordinance, but we have a section in the ordinance that deals with amendments.
Perfect. One other thought I have, and then I'll finish here, is Tim alluded to this. And I'm in a similar position. We're almost on opposite sides of most discussions, being on the development side of things when we're speaking with Rodney or Peter. The development side of the market is just that. It's market driven. And so the ordinance looks at things in a very nice, neat box. It's very easy to organize it into sections and paragraphs and tell everyone just exactly how it's supposed to go. And all of that seems really appropriate at any given time until the market speaks and things change. And so that's one of the struggles with the ordinance. So I think that's where some of my hesitation comes, and it sounds like Tim's as well. He put it quite well when you say you've got a large text document. To tell you that I've read through it cover to cover would be a lie, so I won't do that. And so much of it only gets drilled down into on a project specific basis. So it's hard for us to comment on some of those specific sections, but I think it's important to be mindful that the market really drives the development. And so the ordinance needs to be able to navigate through those changes in the market. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Other public comments? Going once. Going twice. And we'll go ahead and thank the public very much for their comments, very helpful comments. So we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on the zoning ordinance rewrite at 7:37. So the next item, according to the agenda, is updates from staff. Is there anything you want to say about the updates before we move on to our deliberation?
I can. You have before you our memo that's dated July the 14th. Included in that is on the second page of the memo. We noted that there are additional zoning ordinance revisions and corrections that have been developed. During our last meeting, we discussed some changes that you had, as a planning commission, had identified to the grading permit section and some other elements, stormwater management. In addition to that, there is a long list of essentially typographical errors that were identified. And Phil and Lisa in particular were wonderful in hunting down those typos. So all of those have been incorporated into a set of additional zoning ordinance revisions and corrections that is included in your packet. We did, Chris Dusen identified a couple of changes to those actually that we can discuss. These are typos, but there was actually a typo in the list of typos corrections. It's on the fourth page of that list. It's in the section 11, which is the signs. Basically, halfway down the page 4, there's a reference to it's a second reference to page 11-12, and the section 11.6 D5, and it says correct and to an. That there is actually no typo there. That was my typo in leaving that in the list when I was going through my edits. And then Chris pointed out one other change that we would need to make. I can certainly provide that if you decide to that you'd like to take an action tonight. I can give you the additional change. It's another typo that we can take care of to include in the list that is part of your recommendation. And I think that actually brings up a good point. There was a question about the adoption process. I'd like to take a moment and just discuss where we are and what the next steps are. The public hearing is really the first formal step in the adoption of a new zoning ordinance. From here, the next step, formal step would be a motion by the Planning Commission to recommend this document onto the Township Board, either as originally put together, we'll call it the March draft that Chris Dusen provided, or recommending it with this list of changes or any other changes that you may see fit to include. You can do that at any time following the hearing. So it can be done tonight if you are comfortable with that. You also, it is completely within your purview to consider what you've heard tonight at the public hearing and to postpone action until your next meeting to give you time to review these additional comments, to consider the ordinance, and if there's anything else you'd like to include in it before it's recommended on. So the timing of your action tonight is up to you. If you're confident and comfortable, you certainly can make a recommendation tonight. It is also equally fine if you choose to take additional time before moving the document forward. What will happen once you make a recommendation is your recommendation would be forwarded along with a copy of the ordinance to both the County Planning Commission and to the Township Board of Trustees. Under the State Zoning Act, the County Planning Commission has an opportunity to make their own review and comment. They have 30 days once we provide it to them to respond, essentially. So they would have the opportunity to review it and provide direction back to the Township Board of Trustees. And then ultimately we go before the Board of Trustees for their consideration and action. But as I said, I just do want to emphasize that the timing of your action is entirely up to you, whether it happens tonight or perhaps at your next meeting. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that come up along the way in your deliberation.
Okay, thank you. So obviously we want to give everyone an opportunity to deliberate, to get any questions that they have answered and so on. In my view, we've had 3 specific questions raised in the public comment, and I certainly want to see some discussion of those. I have questions on them myself. So if it's all right with everyone, we could proceed with those first and then circle back and move through other questions that that commissioners have. Is that okay? So the first item is the issue of building heights in the township. And it was pointed out, I think accurately, that if you look at the standards for the traditional zones, B4, B5, B7, it says 35 feet. And so I guess the first question I would have would be, if a developer wants to build a building higher than 35 feet in one of those zones, if this zoning ordinance as it currently sits is enacted, what would their options be and how would they go about that?
As was mentioned, we have the planned unit development option, and that option has been substantially updated and made much more flexible than what was in the current ordinance. It has a section in it that's simply titled regulatory flexibility. And what that section does is it allows planned unit development, for those that don't know, I should make sure to explain. Planned unit development essentially combines rezoning and let's call it a concept plan review, kind of a light form of site plan review. So you are looking at the land use component, sort of the rezoning part of it, in that it creates a new zoning district, a PUD district. But you're also looking at a specific development plan that shows generally how the things are going to lay out and what activities are going to go on the site. The regulatory flexibility section simply says that well, first of all, the PUD section simply says that the applicant must follow the zoning ordinance requirements. The PUD is not a get out of jail free card where you can simply throw out the ordinance and do something entirely differently. But the regulatory flexibility section says that if there are modifications, or let's call it, I think it refers to as limited deviations, that the developer would like to propose from the strict requirements of the ordinance, they can propose it. That what they would do is they would have right on their concept plan that a list of whatever those limited deviations are, one of which could easily be, and it probably would be, height. Let's say they wanted to do a 50-foot building rather than 35. Then that would be a deviation. They would note right on there that we are proposing, here's the ordinance requirement 35, we are proposing a 50-foot building, and then they would put right on the plan the reason why they are proposing that deviation. The ordinance, the regulatory flexibility section allows you as a planning commission to review that and make recommendations to the board, and ultimately for the board to take action if they wish to approve those deviations, which then become essentially part of the zoning of that property. They become part of that PUD district. And the section, regulatory flexibility, focuses on allowing deviations that essentially make for a better project. These are deviations that as I said, are not simply get out of jail free, but instead are actually designed to provide a better mix of land uses or a better project overall. So there are criteria in that section to guide you and guide the Board of Trustees in your decision. But it is designed to do exactly that, to address issues like height. It even can address land use to some extent to allow a broader mix of land uses. It certainly can address other issues like parking or lighting or building layout, setbacks. Any of those other requirements of the ordinance can be proposed to be deviated from as part of a PUD project. So it's very flexible in that regard. I understand. I don't necessarily disagree with Mr. Beebe's diagnosis of the ordinance and the height standards. I think there can be value in allowing taller buildings in our business districts. We get more activity, more broader broader mix of businesses or activities there. Certainly allows for mixed use where we might have residences and businesses together more broadly than what the use by right is. That we have some challenges with that. One of them is that in terms of as my review coming in at the very end of this process, many of these elements were already set in the ordinance, and it was clear that the Planning Commission had reviewed many of these issues and decided to proceed with them as they are, including building height and setbacks. To make a change at essentially at a late date would really be going back to the beginning of the process. It might require a substantial time to consider what the possibilities are, what the impacts are, what the unintended consequences are of changing the height here or changing the height there or reducing the setback. With the ordinance essentially in a complete draft form, and with the Plan Commission already having spent substantial time on it, that was not something I wanted to address. And I felt the PUD flexibility would address it as easily on a project by project basis, which is quite frankly where I think that belongs. In one case, a taller building may have no impact whatsoever, but on a different piece of property, a taller building might have significant impacts related to light and air and other effects on neighboring properties. We've certainly seen it in other communities where tall buildings on one side of the street are fine, but tall buildings on the other shadow the residences behind them and create all sorts of trouble. So these are all issues that are best addressed on a site-by-site basis, and that's what the planned unit development option does.
And before
I'm sorry, could I make a couple of comments? This is Chris Dusen.
Oh yeah, Chris, go ahead.
With respect to the height, another consideration is that I think that well, I shouldn't say I think, we did take direction from the master plan. And the master plan didn't give any direction or indication that the height should be changed in the commercial areas or anywhere else in the township. So that's an important consideration. Changing the height in a zoning district, we have to remember it doesn't just change it on one piece of property, it changes it throughout the entire zoning district. So you're changing it throughout the township or throughout that entire zoning district. Is going to have a large impact, and it should be something that's studied and given some thought. And typically that is something that's undertaken in the master plan. So as Rodney said, at this stage of the process, it's sort of the horse is out of the stable, but I think that if there's a desire to change the height in the zoning district, the proper thing to do would be to study it and put down some written comments, what the ramifications are in that particular zoning district or whatever zoning districts that you're considering changing the height. And with respect to the fire protection, I think that's might even be a minor consideration because the fire protection requirements are set forth in great detail in other documents. And for buildings of over a certain height and over a certain square footage, they have to be sprinkled. And that's the major way in which fires are addressed in those sorts of buildings. I'm sure that your fire department does not have, or Mount Pleasant Fire Department does not have a ladder that reaches to the height of the Holiday Inn. It's only because the Holiday Inn is sprinkled that they're able to put up a building of that height. So I almost think that the fire protection is not the key issue here. The key issue is the elements that Rodney mentioned, the light, the air, the impact on the adjacent residences and the adjacent buildings, and also the urban design impact, as I mentioned, at the virtual open house that right now, the corridors are primarily 1- and 2-story buildings, primarily 1-story buildings. And so you have to think about, well, what is the impact going to be from having multiple story buildings along various commercial corridors? And is it okay to have the entire district have an accelerated height standard? Or is it better, as Rodney says, to deal with it on a site-by-site basis where you can actually look at the conditions surrounding the site and say, well, this is going to be appropriate or it's not?
Okay, thank you. Let me ask a question, and then before I open it up to the rest of the commission, the PUD approval process is basically public hearing at the PC, recommendation to the township board, and approval by the township board, similar to a rezoning?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And then, so as the public comment pointed out, we already have buildings in some of our zones that are taller than 35 feet. How did those get there? Is this more restrictive than our current ordinance, or were these people getting variances, or how was that working before? I guess Peter would know probably, I would assume.
So can you repeat the question again?
Just, I want to compare what is being proposed versus what currently exists in terms of how one would go about building a building taller than 35 feet in the B4, B5, B7 zones.
Currently, right now, the only way that you'd be able to do that is through the variance process.
Okay, so they've gotten variances.
Well, there is, Mr. Beebe was mentioning buildings, I believe they're mostly apartment buildings. There is a language in the zoning ordinance for apartment buildings that allows additional height under certain circumstances. And so I believe that's how some of those may have come. Some may have come through variances, absolutely, but for apartment buildings anyway, there is a provision in the ordinance for potentially having increased height in certain zoning districts.
Okay. So let me open this up. This is an important topic. Thoughts from from commissioners?
So how often have we been requested to go higher than 35 feet? And if our developers know that we have a process for the one-offs, is it worth putting it in the ordinance or bringing it up at some point that we address it? Or do we just not have enough desire from our developers to go higher than 35 feet?
Mr. Beebe has obviously has brought it up in relation to mixed-use building regulations. I don't know if I'm sorry, I don't know if Peter has any additional thoughts on cases in the past, but as Chris, Mr. Dusen mentioned, most of our commercial development is single story or 2-story. So at least on that side of it, it has typically not been an issue.
The only project that I can recall in recent memory that required a variance for the height of the building is for the Holiday Inn on Pickard Street, Pickard Road, excuse me, but that's it.
Phil, Doug LaBelle had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that, Doug.
Thanks, Rodney. Yeah, so I just had a question on that Holiday Inn. That was just in regards to what Phil had said. So if we adopt this new ordinance, are you saying that the Holiday Inn would not be able, if someone wanted to do that Holiday Inn under our new ordinance, that it would not be allowed? Is that my understanding?
No, if, under the new ordinance, just as the same with the existing ordinance for the Holiday Inn, if a new Holiday Inn, a new hotel that size, they would have to seek the same type of variance that the Holiday Inn sought.
Or they
pursue
would
it.
seek a planned unit development approval,
Right,
which is
exactly.
probably the better approach.
Okay. And then Chris, you had mentioned about the apartment allowance and height. So under the new ordinance, that's allowed to go higher than 35 feet in the new ordinance?
Yes,
What is that height allowed to be?
I'll have to look that up. Do you know off the top of your head, Rodney?
I turned to the current ordinance and it references not to exceed a maximum of 70 feet, but it also requires substantially increased setbacks. It's actually kind of an old standard. It was an idea of creating a tall building in the midst of kind of a park space almost, so it's a building that might be taller, but it's set back further from the road. It's from an urban design perspective, I'm not sure if it's really the best approach because it simply separates people further, but that is the language of the current ordinance. I didn't have I think Chris Duzen's looking up the proposed ordinance version of that.
Yes, I mean, is it safe to assume that the proposed language for this new ordinance is going to mimic that, to be the same, or has that been changed?
I don't think we changed that, no.
Okay, so an apartment building, apartment dwelling could be as high as 70 feet in our township, but if someone wants to build a hotel, they need to come in and get a variance like the Holiday Inn did and would need to do under the new ordinance. Is that fair?
Well, the Holiday Inn would, as Mr. Duzen said, would likely come through the planned unit development process, which would allow them to pursue some flexibility with regards to height or other issues that may come up. Keeping in mind that, as I said, the provision related to apartment buildings requires a substantial increase in the setbacks to go taller. And that's really about ensuring that they're not creating shadow problems for the neighbors. On a commercial site along the Pickard Road corridor, and really almost on any of our commercial sites, that would be very difficult to accomplish in a similar manner for the commercial, because there's simply not enough room to be able to increase the setbacks in the way that that apartment version proposed. The apartment version, essentially the idea was put a tall building in the midst of a park-like space. And that's not what the commercial districts are intended for.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments from other commissioners that haven't spoken yet on this topic?
Alex has his hand up at the moment.
Alex?
Yeah, so the planned use development standard, does that come, see, I can see the problem with the developer or designer preparing all these documents in a wish list and coming to the township and then having their height rejected if that's what they were going to do. So there's a variable and an approval process that isn't written that could possibly be denied. Is that correct?
Well, it is written. Actually, the planned unit development regulations, even that regulatory flexibility section, has standards for considering those types of requests. The benefit to the PUD is that the answer is given early in the development review, or early in the site design process. When I say that PUD combines rezoning and a concept plan, the concept plan element is intended to be that. It's a concept plan. There probably has been some engineering done, enough to know that the site can be developed in the way it's proposed, but it's not a site where you have gone through the full engineering process or even most of the engineering process. It is a concept drawing to show general layout and general mix of uses, and is intended to be a concept. So you do get an answer early on in the process.
Okay.
In addition, it's something that typically with any application, when it comes in, the first step is normally a regular meeting with the planning commission. So even before a hearing is set, the Planning Commission would review the application, and so even at that point, if you as a Planning Commission looked at that list of deviations that was proposed and said, I just can't abide that, whatever it was, let's say they wanted a 150-foot building, you would have ability at the very beginning of the process, before much money has been spent on the developer side, to give counsel back to them as to whether or not this is really a limited deviation as the ordinance is intended to allow for. So it's not something where you would go through a long process, multiple meetings before you get an answer. But the key is also that the PUD section does have standards. It lays out criteria for approving deviations, as well as criteria for approving the PUD itself.
It should be pointed out that the deviation decisions are made by the Planning Commission and the board, rather than the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so you're eliminating the Zoning Board of Appeals step. And that's important because the Zoning Board of Appeals does not have the same knowledge of the overall project like the Planning Commission and the Township Board will have. So it's a streamlined process, the plan unit development, when you look at it from that perspective, that you're eliminating one step, that being the Zoning Board of Appeals step. And in terms of if you needed a special use review, that would require a public hearing. And so a normal review process would be site plan review, special land use, public hearing, going to the Township Board. Plan unit development actually involves the same or fewer steps than the normal review process, if you want to call it the normal review process.
Before I recognize Ryan and James, I want to, I'm looking at that section now because it impacts what Alex was asking about. The only thing I really see, I see the section on distances between buildings, which lays out a lot of dimensional analysis. That's really the only place where I see much reference to the height of buildings. The higher the building, as I think has been pointed out, the higher the building, the greater the distance between them, the more setbacks and so on. I don't see anywhere else in this where we're told, what our guidelines are in terms of how tall a building can be, unless I'm missing something.
You're talking about the multiple family?
I'm just talking about the PUD section.
Oh, the PUD section.
Yeah.
Well, let me go to that section.
Well, the first place where it gives guidance, now this is not specific related to height, but the first place is that item B on the first page of the Plan Unit Development section 3.19, which the regulatory flexibility section. You'll see there that you have 5 criteria. The first one, that deviation is identified in the plan. The second one, it basically sets out what kinds of deviations are possible. The third one is that the deviations shall be consistent with the PUD statement of purpose and shall result in a higher quality of development than would otherwise be possible. So we have a statement of purpose up at the top that lays out what a PUD is and gives guidance. And number 4 is that the deviation shall not include broad waivers of ordinance requirements to be determined to be incompatible with the master plan or the purpose and intent of this ordinance. And then number 5 is permitted deviations shall be accompanied by adequate safeguards, features, or planning mechanisms designed into the project for the purpose of achieving the objectives intended to be accomplished with respect to each of the regulations from which a deviation is sought. That's broad language. These are subjective standards. Yeah. As, you are, just as with a special use permit, where you make subjective judgment calls as to whether a use is appropriate at this location. Will this use be harmonious with its neighbors at this location? Similar here, you're making a judgment call. You have the guidance behind you, the statement of purpose, the purpose and intent of the ordinance. the purpose and intent of the specific standard that might apply, that is all in the ordinance. And in this proposed ordinance, we've expanded those purpose statements to help make sure you have guidance as to why those are there. We have, expanded purpose statement related to signs, an expanded purpose statement related to lighting and parking, all to help guide, this is the reason this regulation exists. But ultimately, it is a judgment call, and a PUD is an optional form of development. It's intended to allow the developer and the planning commission to work in a more collaborative way, to look at site-specific issues. But it is flexible, and so therefore it does require judgment calls to be made, both on the developer's part and on your part. The benefit is that it can allow for more creative projects to come in. It can allow, and certainly as Mr. Dusan pointed out, it eliminates the need for projects to kind of sidestep into the Zoning Board of Appeals realm, where the Board of Appeals has to try to find a hardship or practical difficulty in order to grant a variance. In this, that's not a requirement here. All we're looking at is this going to result in a better project? Is this a deviation that is consistent with our master plan and consistent with the purpose of the ordinance? So it does allow substantial flexibility on all sides, but still provides some safeguards to work within.
All right. So I'll go to Ryan first, and then we'll go to James.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. I think they've largely been answered in some of the commentary that's come out since I raised my hand. But it sounds to, I guess the observation I would make is that it sounds to me like in the brief time I've been serving on the ZBA, what I've come to understand is that variances should be far and few between. That us changing our ordinances or accommodating those types of variances should not be something that's just commonplace. So it sounds to me like in having a planned unit development and having that type of language in our ordinance, that we are now setting forth a path to be able to guide developers through what is admittedly an unpredictable process, because we do fall short of going to each zoning district and saying, well, this is how tall you can build and this is where and everything. So we're actually formalizing a process that doesn't exist, and or at least doesn't exist in a good form right now. So I haven't heard anything yet that is I find bothersome, short of as we discussed earlier, that some sort of comprehensive review that starts to look by zoning district and say, well, we can adjust building heights by these sizes. So I like, so far I haven't heard anything that I don't like about a process using the planned unit development as a process for requesting essentially a variance in building height in a given district.
Okay, James?
Peter or Rodney, have you had many people, developers come in that after your discussion, they've just decided to walk away and not pursue because of something along these lines?
Oh.
So at this point, we haven't had any, I guess, anybody say, I'm not going to deal with it or try because of a height.
No, there's not been any comments about height other than Mr. Beebe's comment.
I just don't want to. I just don't want to scare anybody away. I want, obviously, what you're saying is there's avenues. Whoever comes to the table has an avenue. Pursue whatever height they wish, provided it meets the ordinance.
That is correct, and that is definitely my goal with any time that I have worked on a zoning ordinance, and as Chris has worked on many, I've worked on many. My goal is always to create, as you say, I think creating avenues is a good way to put it. Create avenues for creative projects to make sure we're not accidentally preventing people from proposing something that could be a significant asset to the community, but they may not meet every strict standard of our ordinance. And that's, like I said, the PUD is one of those very useful ways of creating an avenue for that.
Other comments on building heights from commissioners?
I just want to mention that we did include that provision for the 70-foot building height for multiple family developments in the ordinance.
Okay. Thank you. So there were two other questions related to the mixed-use buildings. One of which was a prohibition on the use of ground floor for residential parking or household storage. I guess my first question would be, based on the discussion we've just had, could a person who wants to build a mixed-use building under a PUD simply ask the Planning Commission to ignore that request or that prohibition, and if they had a good enough argument and the Planning Commission decided to go along with it, that they could have it?
Yes, that is something that could be addressed as a limited deviation. This item, and really the next item, which is Mr. Beebe's concerns about item number 4 in that section, which basically says that in a mixed-use building, mixed-use buildings are allowable use in the business district. So this is a commercial district. Mixed-use building is basically one that includes commercial and residential. What section 6.24 and that item number 4 says is that the residential side must remain secondary to the use of the building for commercial. That is, the residences can't take over and become essentially the primary activity in commercial, if it's even there, is somehow secondary to it. It is a judgment call on your part. Mr. Beebe is concerned because it is a judgment call. The section simply says that you must find, as Planning Commission, that the property is still first a commercial property and then second a residential as well. The idea of allowing the residential, in this case it was residential garages, is what he was wanting or talking about with me, on the ground floor, essentially takes up, in the case I think of the project we were contemplating, or the concept he was contemplating, was taking up nearly half of the ground floor space that would otherwise be used for commercial. So at that point, is it really a commercial building anymore? Is it? So the item number 4 is there to make sure that the ground floor stays commercial. Period. That's the intent. And the prohibition on ground floor residential garages and household storage is the same. It's to ensure that the ground floor is a commercial activity. In the city, in Mount Pleasant has a similar mixed-use building requirement. In the city, they are not as concerned about parking because many people walk or bike to these sites. They're in the area near the campus. So having a building that may not have parking, a lot of parking around it is not a significant issue in some locations in the city. In the township, we have to deal with parking. No matter what, most of the people that are going to be accessing our properties, including any mixed-use building development, are going to be doing it by automobile. Certainly, we want to provide for pedestrians. We want to provide robust options for biking and walking to a site, but we have to make sure we provide for sufficient parking. And so typically that would include parking that may be in front of the building, but also parking that would be behind the building. And those that are parking behind the building would essentially be looking at a row of residential garages rather than the commercial on the ground floor. And so from a design perspective, based on what our needs are in the township, that ground floor residential storage or other residential use really is not conducive to keeping the primary use of that property as commercial on the ground floor.
Okay. All right. So, I know what I wanted to ask. So this question is for Chris. It's on this general topic. The commenter expressed concern that this process, a developer could potentially invest a lot of money in plans and all this sort of thing and get to the planning commission, and the planning commission says, you know, this is ridiculous and all this sort of thing. Under the ordinance as proposed, how would that work in practice? How would a developer go about sounding out or getting a feel for whether this is something that's going to fly or not before they invest all this money and go to all this trouble? You know, I know we have the option of a preliminary site plan, but even before that, can you address that?
Sure. There's, first of all, there's the opportunity to meet with the staff in a preliminary sort of way and get their input. And the staff certainly is tuned in to the Planning Commission and the Township Board as to what their interests are, and they're tuned into the master plan and know what the master plan says. So there's one level of security. The second level of security, I don't know whether you're referring to the planned unit development, but the planned unit development at the initial stage requires, in essence, as Rodney said, a concept site plan, not a full-blown site plan. And so this is important because you're not making the full investment of a site plan. You're making a partial investment in order to demonstrate to the Planning Commission and the staff that you've got a viable concept and that the deviations that you're proposing make sense and that you're going to improve the community with your project. And on that basis, you can move forward and you can get your decisions made before you complete a complete site plan. Now, going back and looking at the alternative process would be to complete a full site plan and go through the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission would say, well, you need a variance. And since you're not going through the planned unit development process, you're going to have to get a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So you're going to complete a full site plan anyway and go to the Planning Commission, and then it's going to be a pot shot when you get to the Zoning Board of Appeals, whether you get the variance or not. You may not get the variance, and then you're back at square one with your site plan again. So there's more, the confidence level, in my perspective, is much greater with the planned unit development than it is with the traditional process of site plan review and going through the variance process.
Comments from commissioners on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would only point out that just to reinforce that, you know, on the ZBA, a variance should be far and few between. To me, it sounds like the planned unit development is giving an opportunity to get feedback much earlier in the process. And it sounds, I mean, the way I'm hearing it described, if we go through a typical process of a site plan review and then going to a variance, realistically, there should be a much smaller likelihood of success, because a variance is requesting for us to go against either our master planning or go against our ordinance, and as a default, we should be starting off with a no, unless there's a demonstrated hardship or a strong rationale for why we should be going against our own ordinance. So to me, I think that just reinforces, if we understand that fact about the ZBA, then it just reinforces the fact that the planned unit development gets you into the door and gets you kind of talking about that process much earlier, and potentially at a time when you've not spent nearly as much money.
Other comments from folks? On this topic or any topic at this point regarding the ordinance?
If I may, just one last thought on the mixed-use buildings that I would just want to point out. The current ordinance has a, I think it calls it multi-use building provision that allows for residential and commercial in the same site. It is a commercial, I'm sorry, it is a special land use in the commercial districts in the current ordinance. It also has very significant limitations on what kinds of residential units can be included that make it hard to work with. But the big element of that is it is a special use in the current ordinance. So it goes through the long review process that Mr. Dusan pointed out. With the proposed ordinance, one of the key changes that was made is to make this mixed use building provision a use allowed by right in the commercial district. So it's simply site plan review. If they can meet the criteria that are in section 6.24, so obviously they stay within 35-foot height and the other elements that are in that section, all they need is a site plan approval from you. They don't go through multiple steps. They don't go through a public hearing. So the process is streamlined significantly. If they would like to have more than section 6.24 allows for, then they can pursue a planned unit development. But even then, the process, as Mr. Dusan pointed out, is actually is shorter or less cumbersome than our current special use permit site plan combination.
Okay, thank you. So to summarize at this point, as Rodney pointed out at the beginning of all this, we've got several options. We can take a vote to recommend the ordinance to the Township Board with the corrections that have been supplied by Township staff and any others that we might want to make at this time. We can take a vote to recommend that they deny it or vote it down. I'm not sure why we would do that, but that is an option. And then we can also postpone decision until our next meeting. So what is the pleasure of the commission?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval with the additional changes recommend to the Township Board of Trustees that the PTXT 2002 zoning ordinance update be adopted with the following additional revisions and corrections, and that is to incorporate the list of additional zoning ordinance revisions and corrections dated July 13th, 2020 into the final as adopted zoning ordinance document.
Support.
So the motion was by Webster and the second was by Buckley to basically recommend approval to the Township Board with the changes as supplied by Township staff. Rodney, I think you said there was one other one that you were going to give us. Now?
If it be all right, what I can do is I can essentially read out what the changes are, and then I can work with Jennifer to make sure that they get into the motion if you agree that to include them. As I mentioned, the first change is that there was a typo in the list, and that's in the middle of page 4. It's labeled as page 11-12, section 11.6.d.5, comma, correct and A-N-D to an, A-N. That is a typo, and so I would recommend that simply be deleted from the list. There were 2 additions. The 2 additions are, the first addition is page 11-24, section 11.13.a.7, delete subsection C. This is language related to a ground sign bonus. It's language that is left over from a previous draft that simply needs to be removed. It no longer applies. The other change is page 11.25, section 11.13.c. Correct the section reference under, quote, ground sign bonus, unquote, to, quote, section 11.13.a.7, unquote. And that's actually part of that same change. So with those 3 items, 1 deletion and 2 additions, I would just ask that those be included. And as I said, I can work with Jennifer to make sure that if you're comfortable with it, that gets into the motion correctly.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded to recommend this. Further discussion?
Rodney and Peter, I think that there's one mistake in regards to, as I, again, being on the Sidewalks and Pathways Committee, section 710, where it talks about sidewalks and pathways, and specifically under C, design standards, it makes reference to a bicycle path and sidewalk ordinance. I don't think that's the name of the ordinance. Bicycle path and sidewalk ordinance. I don't think we have one, do we? I don't think that's the correct name. It's on page 7-6.
Yeah, I agree with you. That is not the correct title for that ordinance.
So I would just make sure that whatever, I think it's just called the Sidewalks and Pathways Ordinance, isn't it, Peter?
Hold on a second.
So I think we just need to correct that name.
It is known as the Sidewalk and Pathway Ordinance.
Yes.
Okay, so that's been noted. Anything else? Any other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I just had a comment. You know, I don't mind supporting. There's a lot of information in here, and you know, I think you know, Andy Tyson in his comments mentioned that everything looks good. You know, everything is maybe easier to get to, but when it really comes to real life situation, how does it function? Was that the intent? Maybe it wasn't. I'm okay supporting something like this as long as our township staff and all the people making the decisions are willing to work with these developers or residents when something arises and go, hey, this really wasn't the intent. Maybe we need to change this, sooner than later, instead of saying, well, let's add this to the list and we'll wait a year. Well, if someone comes to you within a month and we realize that's not the intent, I'm hoping, I'm banking on that our township staff and the people making these decisions are going to be able to be flexible in accommodating these types of unforeseen circumstances. So I'm putting my faith in township staff that this will occur for residents or developers that run into these issues.
Stan?
Yeah, I guess I have a question about that. I guess as we develop this, to Commissioner LaBelle's point, if staff changes, will this get lost in purpose and in translation of what the actual intent is? Because we can agree upon this today, understanding what the intent is, but if something changes, does that potentially get lost?
I think that one of the things that we've tried to do is be pretty explicit with our language. And that was a problem with the old ordinance, that there were a lot of sections of the ordinance that were not very clear, and it led to interpretation problems. And so we spent a lot of time on the language, and every word's been gone over and turned over and reviewed. And I think we've done a really good job, to be honest, about getting the language right and making sure that the intent is set forth. So I think that a lot of those interpretation problems that existed in the past are not going to exist anymore. The second thing I should point out is that the zoning ordinance, as I mentioned, is based on the master plan. It has to be based on a plan that's according to Section 203 of Act 110. And so that master plan has been adopted and is in place, and that also stands with the zoning ordinance to help interpret the zoning ordinance. So I think there's pretty good safeguards in place, even if the staff does change, which I hope they don't. You've got a good staff. And so I think there are good safeguards in place.
James?
A question. If somebody comes to you, Peter or Rodney, and with a development, and you review, and you just, for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem to meet the criteria. Not that you're telling them they can't pursue, but it doesn't meet it. And is that something that is typically brought to the board to review with you?
I can tell you this, that, from a philosophical standpoint, that my job as staff for doing this Township is to help people be successful, and that's developers, residents, business owners, whoever is coming to the township for project, whatever that is, from a building permit for a deck to a site plan for a large scale development project. My job is to help them be successful. Now, sometimes, let's say in the case where somebody comes and says, I want to put I want to put an industrial use in that residential neighborhood. I mean, and obviously they wouldn't, but the extreme example, they want to do something that's completely against the master plan, completely against the zoning of that area. By nature, I have to help them be successful somewhere else. And that's a quote of a old retired township supervisor, a friend of mine. He said, I try to always help people be successful. Sometimes I have to help them be successful somewhere else. But that's really my goal is I aim at helping people with what they're working on. So for example, if there's a case that comes in and they're going to need a variance, they want to seek a variance, I view my job as even if I oppose the variance, even if I think it's a bad idea, my job is to help them understand the ordinance, understand the criteria that apply, understand the process to seek an approval of a variance, and understand how to provide the strongest arguments in favor of their case. Now, I'm not going to write the application for them, but I'm going to make sure to help them with any question they have and help them build the best argument they can related to that. Often I encourage people to get professional advice in those circumstances. I think you need to talk to an attorney, or I think it might help you to talk to a civil engineer, where I see that that's valued. Even if I oppose what they're doing, I'm going to do that because I do want them to have the best opportunity to make their case. And so we're not about saying no just to say no. Our job is to help people. We're not about to do something against the master plan or to throw out the ordinance. Our job is also to follow the ordinance and to administer and enforce the ordinance as it's written, not to interpret something into it that's not there. But ultimately, we are a customer service oriented organization, and I do all that I can do, and I encourage my staff to do all that we can do to help people be successful in what they're trying to accomplish.
I was just wondering if they had more of like a checks and balances. Somebody's really close, and it's kind of a call. I'm sure you would, where you're not really sure how to proceed, to maybe for the purpose of the intent to present it to the Planning Commission, not necessarily in the format that we're seeing here today, but more of as an informal to, hey, am I thinking right? And as this group collectively have their input, that we're all on the same page, so that maybe a developer, it would be another avenue for them, checks and balances, before they really dive in and make the investment for.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. I know Peter has certainly done exactly that. He's brought issues to the Plan Commission or to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Obviously, there's been text interpretations for the Board of Appeals, which is a formal process, but and he's used that where there have been ambiguities. And he's also brought questions essentially to both to me but also I know in the past he's brought things out to raise questions just like you're talking about. As we work with this ordinance, as Mr. Dusan pointed out, we're going to be identifying we'll call it a punch list of things that may need to be incorporated into amendments. We certainly will be bringing those to the Plan Commission's attention as they come up. The timing, Mr. Dusan recommended a year, and that's the same recommendation I would typically make. But ultimately, the timing of any amendment that might be made to take care of those punch lists is ours to decide. We decide when that is appropriate, and so we'll be bringing things to you that come up as they come up. And if decisions made to pursue an amendment, that is something you, as the Planning Commission, have the right to initiate on your own initiative. You can choose to initiate an amendment to the ordinance. So if you give direction to staff to say we want this to proceed with that, we will proceed with it.
On a punch list that you talked about, and you talked about maybe not necessarily a year, but at the end of that year. So you're talking December of 2020 if we discover a punch list. Is that, if we discover something in March, isn't that a little bit too long? I mean, like yourself, like you said, we want to be part of everybody's success if we can. I would hate to recognize in February that, boy, we need to discuss the intent and make sure that we stay with the intent, but I may have found an issue here so that we could act a little sooner than 7 or 8 or 9 months down the road.
Yeah, I don't have any objection to it. As I said, a year is a good frame of reference, but it's certainly not a rigid standard. The key is that one thing you do have to remember is that amendments do cost money. There's multiple publications, multiple notices, not just the notice for this hearing, but there are 2 notices related to any township board action because of the notice of the first reading and then the notice of adoption. Those notices are somewhat costly because to do them right, they're somewhat costly because the notice is intended to provide a clear summary of what the change is, and that takes some words to really do it in a way that anybody reading it can understand what's being proposed. So there is an expense associated with any amendment, and we would want to be careful with the township's money. As I said, though, if the Plan Commission determines that the change is needed now rather than waiting until we incorporate additional items, then if you give direction to pursue it, we would pursue it because you, in the ordinance, it says clearly you have the right as a Plan Commission to initiate an amendment to the zoning ordinance on, basically by motion to direct staff to do it.
I don't think it would cost as much as a possible missed opportunity, provided, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
If understand to be responsible with the township's money, but boy, if it wouldn't cost as much as a missed opportunity. This
is why you guys get paid the big bucks, right, to make these judgment calls. Right. But that's why the Planning Commission is a body that makes policy judgments. The Zoning Board of Appeals makes really judicial judgments. They are essentially a quasi-judicial body. You are a policy-making body, and so you do have the absolute right to make those judgments. Our process is to implement those. We often bring things to you that we're aware of, so we also are making recommendations sometimes. But as staff, we implement the policy direction of the township, and that includes the decisions you make.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Other discussion on the motion? If not, then I'll ask Jennifer to call the roll, please.
Cody,
She's muted.
Quattrito,
Yes.
Webster,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Shingles,
Yes.
Buckley,
Yes.
Waring,
Yes.
and LaBelle.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you. Okay. So that moves on to the next step. And then what we have next are a couple of zoning map amendments, basically necessitated by change in the lineup of permitted of the zones that are in the new ordinance. So the first one is rezone 20-01, referring to areas A, D, and C. So again, I'll turn it over to Rodney for an introduction, and then we'll move on to the public hearing.
Thank you. This area A, B, and C, there are three areas of the township that were identified as needing to have a potential rezoning of land. This comes out of the zoning ordinance update. As part of that update, two zoning districts were identified as needing to be removed from the ordinance. The first one is the R5, which is called the Single Wide Mobile Home District. This district was identified as by our consultant as being outdated. It's not consistent with applicable state law. Determination was made that it need to be removed, and it is not included in the proposed zoning ordinance. The other one is the B6 district, which is entitled the Auto-Related Highway Business District. This one is determined that we simply have, we have multiple highway business zoning districts, B5, B6, and B7. It was found really that the B6 is simply unnecessary. And so the proposal is to eliminate that district and consolidate those properties that are zone B6 into other zoning districts. So for this area A, B, and C, these areas are essentially contiguous groups of lots. Let's call it contiguous neighborhoods, where there are multiple lots proposed to be rezoned. In the case of the R5, proposing to rezone the area, this area to the R2B district, which is entitled 1 and 2 family zoning district. And then for the B5, I'm sorry, the B6 district, we're proposing to rezone a large group of lots on both sides of East Pickard Road to the B7 district, which is entitled Retail and Service Highway Business. The districts that we're proposing to move these properties to are similar in character. We're not creating any new non-conforming uses, and so it's really a technical change because of dropping these two districts from our ordinance. The other comment I would make is that the reason we grouped A, B, and C together is our state zoning act allows the township, anytime when you have groups of 11 or more contiguous properties that are being proposed to be rezoned, that the state zoning act changes the notice requirements. We do not have to send out individual notices to the properties and to everybody within 300 feet of that group. We just have to publish the notice and map as we've done, and also post it obviously at the township hall. So that's why area A, B, and C are grouped together, because they fall under that provision of the state law that allows us to proceed without individual notice to the properties. Area D, which is our next hearing, that one required individual notices, so we separated out as a separate hearing process. So as I said, at this point, the existing and proposed districts are similar in character, a mix of allowable uses. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the master plan and will not create any new non-conforming uses. And this change is necessary to implement the proposed zoning ordinance changes that we've been discussing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Rodney. You answered my one question about why they were grouped the way they were grouped. I think unless anyone has any urgent questions, I think we'll save those for the deliberation, but we'll move on to the public hearing. So because this is a rezone, it is accompanied by a public hearing. And so we want to give everyone who wants to speak on this an opportunity to speak. So we'll proceed as we did before. I'll ask members of the audience who want to speak to raise their hand electronically. I'll recognize them, and we'll give everyone who wants to speak an opportunity to speak. Once everyone who's done that has spoken, we'll recognize people for additional comments. So the public hearing on rezone request 20-01 is open at 8:47. And I see a hand, Tim Beebe, I'll recognize.
Okay, I have a number of questions and comments, so bear with me. On the first map, I noticed that the boundary was very irregular and it jugs around a lot. Curious the reasoning for that. Maybe it was already rezoned. But when I did that project, I don't remember the zoning district being in that form. Next question is this large piece of property that's at the back. It's, to my knowledge, the only parcel that was still zoned in the township that would allow a mobile or modular park to go into. The benefit of that zoning was the density that was allowed. You're switching it to R2A, which changes the density from 6,000 square feet per lot to 8,400 square feet per lot. I'm interested whether or not the owner of the property was notified that there would be a change to his property with the changing from 6,000 square feet to 8,400 square feet per developed parcel. Whether you want to view it that way or not, I would imagine that he's going to view it as a taking because it's, you know, over a third larger for lot use. I did a development set of drawings on this back in 2008 when everything crashed. They're still sitting in my files, and they went under the premise of the R5 with that density. The next map, which is an existing subdivision, makes all the sense in the world. I don't think there's anything in there that's going to be in violation of the R2B, and makes sense to change that. The third drawing, there are a few differences between B6 and B7. Permitted uses within B6 are the retail auto sales. If it changes to B7, it's now a special use. Same thing with auto wash areas. They used to be a permitted use, now they would be a special use. I don't see where instant oil change establishments are listed, but they may be included in some other item. And bus passenger stations and bus storage buildings, I'm not sure exactly, that's kind of an old terminology, but they're not addressed either. It by getting rid of the B6, it might be wise to maybe add some wording to B7 so as not to take away from the properties what their rights currently are. I don't have a specific project that's proposed in that area, but that portion of Pickard is an awful lot of car lots. It used to be a permitted use, now it'll be a special use. So, number of questions. I was hoping to see what some of the answers would be.
Okay, thank you. We'll ask for other public comments first, and then we'll proceed with some of that. Any other public comments during the public hearing? Going once. Going twice. Okay, well, we thank the public for their comments, useful comments again. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this rezone request at 8:53. Some good questions have been raised. Kind of take them in order. The first one, the first R5 to R2B, the one on the west side. That one little property we rezoned a couple of years ago, it's a special use, right? Do you remember, did that go to R2B already, or did we do it to something else?
No, the one property in the Copper States, it was rezoned R2B, and that was for a group daycare home, so they could seek that special use permit.
Okay, all right, so that's good. It's not, it won't be a spot zone then. What about the issue of the square footage of the allowed lot? Any thoughts?
I guess one other comment before we get to that, and that is a irregular boundary. The boundary you see here is the boundary of the R5, and as currently shown on the official zoning map, and it actually does split a property. I'm not sure how it got that way, but this does reflect the current zoning. The lot area question is certainly an interesting one. This is really where we're trying to implement the master plan. The master plan has certain guidance, and the change is consistent with the master plan. The problem with the R5 district is not consistent with our master plan. It's not, but more importantly, it's not entirely consistent with state law and case law that governs the housing issues. So no matter what, there would be a need to make a change. Whatever we did with that, the change would still need to be made. I respect Mr. Beebe's comment, but the R5 district, it's being removed for a good reason. So at that point, then we need to decide what do we do with that property instead. If somebody wishes to propose a type of development that is not consistent with the current zoning, they certainly can bring that to you, and they could seek to have it rezoned to a district that would allow for it. And you would review it as you would with any project, any proposed rezoning.
But there's no other residential. Is there any other denser? There's nothing in the new ordinance. There's nothing that's going to be as dense as the R5 was, is there?
We do have a mobile,
just the mobile
home district in the R4 district.
Oh, that's right. Okay, all right. And is the lot size similar to what we had in the R5?
Well, the R4 is a district intended for mobile home or manufactured housing park. So that certainly could be proposed and put into an R4 classification. I think Mr. Dusan had a comment on the density question.
Oh, I was just going to mention that we do have that district available.
Okay. Yeah. And then he also asked, and I guess I'll just ask, based on what you said earlier about grouping these three together and therefore not having to do the usual, notifications, was the property owner for this would not have been contacted?
No, the property owner would not be notified individually. The notice was published in the newspaper more than 15 days ahead as required. It was also posted on our website and posted here at the Township Hall, all as required by by the state act.
Okay. So if the person doesn't read the newspaper, doesn't go to the website, doesn't happen by the township hall, then the way they'll find out about this is when they get their next tax bill?
No, their tax bill will not change based on the rezoning. The property obviously would be changed on the official zoning map. So
But I mean, doesn't it say it on the tax bill or no? Maybe it doesn't.
It does not.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right.
This is, I would just comment, this is not unusual. Especially when you update a master plan in a community, growing community like Union Township, there often are corresponding zoning changes that need to be made to implement that master plan. Just because something was zoned a certain way does not create a right to that zoning in perpetuity. And if there are changes in the policies as reflected in the master plan, then a rezoning of that property is completely appropriate, consistent with the plan. And that's what we're doing here.
So it's, Doug LaBelle here. So it sounded like Mr. Beebe had mentioned that back in 2008, they had some sort of development proposed here, and then obviously the economy, went south, so they ended up not doing that. So this particular R5 was zoned for mobile homes. So obviously it's in, we talked about violation of the state. What's the proper terminology here? That it's not fully consistent with the applicable state laws and established housing related case law in Michigan. So by going to R2B, that wouldn't allow a mobile home park to be there anyway, because that's under R4. So basically we're taking this particular person's use and not allowing him to do what he intended to do when he bought the property. Is that an accurate summation of that, or
You misunderstand. The R5 is not a mobile home park district. It is a district that allows homes that could include modular or manufactured housing on very small lots. But it is the R4 district is our mobile home park district, and this property is not zoned R4. So this is simply a very high density single family district, but the format of the district is such that it's not consistent with as you said, with the laws that apply. And it's best to remove it and move that property into another district. I would also point out 2008 was now more than a dozen years ago. And while certainly I understand the economy and I understand the cycles of development, it was more than a dozen years ago. If he wished to pursue the project, he certainly had plenty of time to do it. And quite frankly, under the proposed zoning, he will have many opportunities to pursue a project that will provide him with substantial development potential. The R2 district is one that is still fairly high density and allows a lot of options. If he wishes to pursue something more, increasing in density or doing other things, again, there are options in the ordinance that he can propose that and potentially get those approved. So he has under the new proposed ordinance, he will have more options than he does now under the current ordinance in the R5 district.
Yeah, but if it's a density issue, I mean, I'm gathering here, and maybe I'm misunderstanding that we're getting rid of this one because of the state, the laws of Michigan. That's one, and we don't need to talk about that again because I get that part. But the density of this would decrease, so there wouldn't be as near as much density. So is that one of our concerns, that it would be too dense? Because if we're taking a lot that's allowed 6,000 square foot of lot, and now it has to be a minimum of 8,400. Obviously, how many particular residences or what somebody's doing with those parcels is limited to less number of those by about a third. So is that the intent?
It's interesting. And I apologize, I'm going to answer your question, but in a little bit of a roundabout way. First of all, Mr. Beebe mentioned the word taking, which is a legal term. It is a term that gets thrown out a lot related to zoning. This is not a taking. We're not taking away all economic viability for this property. We're actually, with the proposed ordinance format, we're increasing the options available. But I had a case at one point where there was a development, this is another community. Development was created a number of years ago, small lots on purpose. They weren't 6,000 square feet, but they were still small, and they were intended for smaller homes. The market changed. It was partially developed with the small homes. In fact, 2008 happened, and the developer went bankrupt. A new developer came in after a substantial delay, and said, you know what, I can't build these homes. I don't have a market for them. What my market is telling me is I need to have space for a 3-car garage. I can't do a 2-car garage. I couldn't even fit a 2-car garage on these lots in most cases. But he said, I've got to have a 3-car garage, and I've got to have a certain square footage, and I've got to have a ranch. That's the market. And so this developer came in and proposed to combine lots together, essentially taking 3 lots and making 2 out of them, because the market had changed. 6,000 square feet is very tiny. There are, I think, the city lots are going to be bigger than that. On a 6,000 square foot lot, there's simply not room to do many things that the market demands be included as part of a single family home today. And so purely from a market perspective, the 6,000 square foot lot is not a terribly viable solution, and probably would end up being adjusted regardless. An 8,400 square foot lot does provide that kind of flexibility to provide the type of homes that the market is demanding.
Yeah, and I wasn't alluding to the taking part. I'm not concerned with that. I'm more from an owner's perspective and from a developer's perspective, what I can do with it if I've intended it for something, regardless of whether it was 12 years ago or not. If I'm looking to do something with it and now it's changed and I'm never even notified, I think that's not good business on the township's part. If the owner wasn't notified, I'm sorry, but I would disagree respectfully with that approach.
Well, I do respect that. The state law the provisions were drafted for a reason, and this again gets back in part to making a good use of township resources. We can't simply notify that one owner. We have to notify all the owners, and we have to notify everyone within 300 feet of the outer boundary of that proposed rezoning area. In a practical standpoint, that becomes very challenging to do while being fiscally prudent with township resources. The state law included this provision for a reason. It's been in the law for years. It is something that is routinely done when you're looking at exactly this kind of a rezoning, where what we're doing is responding to a master plan update, also responding to the need to make a technical change in the zoning ordinance. So it is simply not fiscally prudent to provide notices to all of those lots and all of the 300 those within 300 feet of them for this hearing.
Yeah, and I respectfully disagree. I think there's a right way to do business, and if there's a cost to that, then I think that's something that we do.
Okay.
I just again, we've had many conversations on the phone, you and I, Rodney, and this is one that we will disagree on. It's just doing things the right way, and I just think there is a cost associated with that, and I just don't think the township made the right decision in this case.
This would be my suggestion. You as a planning commission, your role is obviously make a recommendation on this. The Township Board of Trustees has the option to hold a second hearing if they choose. And as part of that second hearing, can provide direction related to how notices should be sent beyond what the state law specifically requires as a minimum. And so if the Board of Trustees determines that there's a need to have a second hearing and to notify all of those property owners, as I said, we cannot simply notify one. It's really, we'd have to notify all, and not just for the R5, but also for the B6 properties. The Board of Trustees can make that decision. And in this case, the Board of Trustees has the purse strings. They decide the budget. And so if they are really in the position to decide whether it is right from a fiscal point of view to spend that money. on the additional notices. So I guess that would be my recommendation, is let the Board of Trustees make that decision.
Okay. I'm just going to point out that I noticed that Tim Beebe has had his hand up for a while. Now, the public hearing was held and is closed, but I also believe in the power of information. So I'm just going to ask if we can briefly ask him if he has a point of information, a brief point of information on this particular topic, as opposed to, you know, expounding views on the matter. I'd recognize him for a brief comment.
My only comment is the individual that owns the property is not in the area. He lives in Arizona. So the likelihood that he saw any notices on the township hall or in the newspaper, pretty small. So that was my only comment.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Now, let me ask one question. Because these are grouped as A, B, and C, we have to act on them together, correct?
You can act however you choose. If you wish to separate them out and recommend, I would certainly do it as if you're doing it, do it by map. So map A, map B, and map C.
Mm-hmm.
If you wish, you can recommend them separately.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. That's helpful. So what about the issue of B6 versus B7? What's allowed? Sounds like they're not really identical.
No, they're similar in character and mix of uses, but no, they're not. No two districts would be identical, or simply probably combine them long ago. The question of whether something is a permitted use or a special use, that certainly has value. We've already talked about that the special use permit process adds time to any development. I think Mr. Beebe mentioned as a positive, or as a comment in favor of the B6, that the area already has a large number of automobile dealerships. That can also be taken as a reason to consider requiring a special use permit for any new ones, simply because a proliferation of a single use can actually limit the functionality of a district and create trouble down the road if things change and all of a sudden you have a large expanse of empty dealerships. I've certainly seen that happen. I've worked in communities that had a large expanse of dealerships, and of course, talking about 2008, the Great Recession, decisions were made as General Motors in particular went into bankruptcy, but also Chrysler, where whole swaths of existing dealerships were suddenly closed, where the auto company pulled the ability for that dealership to continue to operate. And suddenly communities, especially smaller communities, found themselves with a number of empty dealership spaces. So anytime you have all of your eggs in one basket, it's not necessarily a positive thing. So this could be a very good reason to consider a special use permit for any new dealerships. Wouldn't affect the existing ones, but certainly would give you some ability to consider, is this really the best choice to make for this particular site? Now, having said that, you also have the ability to consider adjusting the land uses in the B7 at some point. That said, that may be an amendment item down the road. It is something, as Mr. Dusen pointed out, should be done carefully and done with careful examination and looking at what are the unintended consequences, what are the impacts, positive and negative, and evaluate them before you make that kind of a decision. In this case, the B7, we're going to see in the Area D. Area D, we're proposing to move it to B5 because the surrounding properties are B5. In this case, the surrounding properties are B7. So we simply are matching the surrounding zoning. But in both cases, the proposed district is similar in character and mix of uses.
Okay. Thank you.
I should point out that a couple of the uses that Mr. Beebe identified as not being included are included as principal permitted uses. Those would include instant oil change shops are permitted in the B7, and bus, train, and other forms of transportation systems passenger stations are permitted as principal permitted uses.
All right, thank you. Let's see. James, you had your hand up, but now you don't anymore.
Yeah, I was just looking back. I'm sorry to jump back on you a little bit. On page 31, where do you go from R5 to R2B? So you're saying R2B is the closest thing to R5 rather than R4?
Yes, that is the proposal.
But do you think that's the closest to?
As I said, the R5 is not a mobile home park district. So it is more similar to the R2B because it is a single family district. The R4 is, mobile home parks are a specialty type of development. They have their own state law, they have their own state commission that governs the rules. They are different in character to a single family neighborhood type zoning in that. So R5 is not a mobile home park. It does obviously reference that type of housing unit, but it is a single family district. And so the R2B is the closest equivalent.
Okay. So we have this item, and as a rezone, our job is to either recommend any or all of them to the township board for approval, I guess recommend for denial or postpone. And as Rodney pointed out, they can be taken separately. Our chief mover is muted.
Really? I will, I'll be happy to make a motion, and I'm going to take them all as one, as submitted in the draft. I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the Township Board of Trustees that the PREZ 2001 zoning map amendments areas A, B, and C be adopted. 1, to rezone land depicted on area A map east of South Crawford Road, abutting portions of Saddle Lane, Stirrup Lane, and Bridle Lane in the northwest corner of section 34 from R5, single wide mobile home district, to R2B, 1 and 2 family district. Number 2, to rezone land depicted on area B map east of South Isabella Road, abutting portions of Jonathan Road, Berkshire Road, Genchrist Lane, Honey Bear Lane, and Ruby Road in the northwest corner of section 13 from R5, single wide mobile home district, to R2B, 1 and 2 family district. And 3, to rezone land depicted on the area C map east of Packard Street on the north and south sides of East Pickard Road, and also abutting portions of Corporate Drive, Belmont Drive, Carter Street, and Betty Lane in the southeast quarter of section 11 and northeast corner of section 14 from B6 auto related highway business district to B7 retail and service highway business district.
Support.
So the motion was by Webster, second was by Cody. Discussion?
Yeah, I think I'm with Commissioner LaBelle as the owner of the Crawford Road parcel, possibly not even being notified. That's just a little disturbing to me.
Therefore, my recommendation, the recommendation is, if this is the Board of Trustees, that we make that known to the Board of Trustees, that there was a concern by the Planning Commission of that, that person was not notified.
Well, as I said, the issue is it has to be all or nothing. It can't be just that one. But my thought would be is that if you can make it part of this motion if you wish, but you could also make a separate motion, essentially recommending, if you wish, a second hearing with all of the residents and the surrounding 300 feet notified. But it really has to be all or nothing. We can't do just one.
So the
Then I would-
notification wouldn't necessarily be the owner of the parcel, just 300 feet around him?
Oh, no, it'd be the owners of all the properties subject to rezoning, plus the owners of the properties. It's actually anybody living within 300 feet or owning property within 300 feet of the subject properties.
So this gentleman's mailing address in Arizona probably received a notification.
No, because under, as I mentioned, under the state act, because there's more than 11 or more contiguous properties proposed for rezoning, we do not have to provide individual notices. So the notice went in the paper, on the website, and at the township hall. But individual mailed notices were not sent for areas A, B, and C. But as I said, we'd have to do it for all of them. We can't just do it for one.
Right.
But if you wish, as I said, you can make essentially a second motion to recommend to the Board of Trustees that they hold a second hearing and provide individual notice to all the properties that will be required to receive it. And they can then decide if they wish to do that.
I would suggest that we do that.
I want to withdraw my support then, because I don't believe that's a lot of postage. That's a lot of parcels, a lot of places to send that to. If you're doing every single spot and 300 feet around it, that's a lot of notification.
Therefore, I would recommend that we rule on this motion, and then if the commissioners feel that notification be done, we do it a second motion.
Right,
Make
I would do
it
that as a
separate.
separate motion from this,
Yeah.
this recommendation.
Hey, just one question, Rodney, if I may. So if we were to, you're saying all three A, B, and C had to be included if we did, because we did D separate. If we did A separate, could we do B and C under that, or does that not work?
Well, this motion is recommending all three together.
No, I understand that part. I'm just saying, if it were to be redone, are you able to do parcel A or do map A separately and notify all those people, but do B and C with the rules that you're talking about where you don't have to notify?
Well, here's the problem is that, first of all, I think I think map C is the one that's just the business. Map A and map B both are dealing with the R5. And so we really couldn't provide notice for one group of R5 changes and not provide notice for the other group of R5.
Okay.
I think that we would have to provide to both. And quite frankly, if we're providing individual notices, at that point, we really can't justify not providing them to the business district. So this really is a case where if we were going to do individual notices, we should either do all, or we should follow the state law that allows us to proceed as we've done. But as I said, I would just simply proceed on this motion, and then if you wish, if somebody can make a second motion to make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees related to recommending a second hearing with individual mailed notices.
So we did notices for map D, but we opted not for A, B, and C because of the fiscal responsibility in that.
We're simply following the state law. Map D, there's only 3 properties involved that are contiguous, and so we're required to provide individual notices. Maps A, B, and C, there are far more than 11 contiguous properties, and so we are not required under state law. The provision of state law specifically says we do not need to provide individual notices.
Yeah, no, I understand what the state law says, but
it's not an opt-out. It's simply that we're following the state law.
Well, you have an option under state law to not have to provide notification, and we're choosing to utilize that law. But we also have the option that we could send postage and notify everybody. Is that correct?
Yes. And this is again something that I would recommend being left to the Board of Trustees. You simply make a recommendation to them, because Board of Trustees has holds the purse strings, and if they choose to, from a fiscal perspective, hold a second hearing, which they have the option to do under this process to rezone the property, they can choose to hold a second hearing. And if they choose to, they can direct that individual notices be mailed. And at that point, they are spending their money. It's the township's money, but they are the ones that have the responsibility for fiscal decisions in the township. And so it would be most appropriate to let them make that decision.
I'd like to call for the question.
I guess I
I
have
don't
to.
think there's support.
Lisa withdrew her support.
Yeah, I was going to say the seconder withdrew their second. Are they
I
still?
said if the changes were made.
So
So you're
therefore,
still,
there has been no changes in the motion. I, as the motioner, did not change that motion.
Okay, then I still support that.
so the motion is there and it's been seconded. James has his hand up. I'll recognize him briefly.
Thank you. If this get voted down and we still have properties that are zoned that don't exist, correct? Because we're saying R5 is in B6. Yeah, is that correct? Are not in our new zoning map.
Well, if this motion is voted down, then it will be as if you made no motion. The process for rezoning requires a recommendation from the Plan Commission. So a different motion would be in order at that point. And whatever motion you make to recommend to the Board of Trustees, they would then consider and ultimately take action on as they.
Call for the question.
But if voted down, we could
Call
entertain.
for the question.
Okay, let's take a vote.
All right. So question's been called. So I'll ask Jennifer to call the roll, please.
Buckley,
Yes.
Squattrito,
Yes.
Faring,
No.
Fuller,
No.
Webster,
Yes.
LaBelle,
No.
Shingles,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Darren.
Yes.
6-3.
Okay, motion carries. All
I'd like to make another motion
right.
to recommend to the Board of Trustees for a public hearing regarding Area A map, Area B map, Area C map, and that appropriate, and the recommendation would be that appropriate residents of that area be notified of the rezoning that has been recommended by the Planning Commission.
Is there a second?
Is that so that the board would hold a second hearing?
Yes, and that the appropriate notification to those residents, our recommendation is that the Board of Trustees notifies all those individuals affected by this rezoning.
I'll support that.
Okay, so the motion was by Webster with a second by Fuller to further recommend to the Township Board that they conduct a second public hearing and that they exercise their option to notify all of the property owners, the owners and the property owners within 300 feet. Discussion? Ryan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious. Is it fair to say that when we did our master planning that we made some at least subtle changes to the majority of our zoning districts in terms of the language or the description, that sort of thing? I mean, is that a fair assessment or no?
No, working on the master plan, there were no changes to the current zoning districts or language or intents of any of the districts.
We didn't change any semantics. I seem to remember having conversations about that. I guess maybe I guess I'm just mixing it up with something else.
You don't want to confuse the future land use map and the areas on the future land use map with the different zoning districts.
Yeah, you changed the policies. Master plan is a policy document. So you did make changes to the policies that apply to the residential districts. Ultimately now, actually, this is the point where we're implementing those policy changes by the zoning ordinance is one of the tools to implement the master plan. And so things like what we're doing right now with updating the zoning ordinance and making adjustments to the map are all about implementing the policy decisions that you discussed when you were developing the plan. This is exactly what Chris Dusen was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
what he's thinking about is those future land use categories and the descriptions of those. Yes, that's what I think those are the
Right.
you're thinking of. But they don't,
I mean, I guess
they don't correspond exactly to the zones.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm just, I guess I feel like we've done our due diligence by following state law. I mean, we talk about future land use and that sort of thing, and we don't send notifications to people telling them that the future land use isn't what it's being currently used at, or our intent for that is. We don't give them that notification like that, and it feels kind of like we're just cherry picking, I guess. But I don't mind leaving it up to the board to make the decision. I just curious as to why we're stuck on this particular issue, but I guess that's my take on it.
You know, I would make one other thought, and that is that nothing is stopping Mr. Beebe from letting the gentleman know that this change is proposed. He could have done that if, obviously, Mr. Beebe saw the notice and he's aware of the property. He could have sent a copy of the notice to the gentleman. He would have had plenty of time to do that before this hearing. He certainly has plenty of time to do it before the township board meeting. Now, I'm not saying that I'm putting it on Mr. Beebe to do that, but I'm saying he could. He's concerned about this gentleman's circumstances. He has absolutely the ability to let him know, and that is not something the township has any control over or should have any control over. And he also, Mr. Beebe, is not under any obligation to let all the properties owners know. He could simply notify the gentleman who owns that vacant land.
Lisa?
There's hundreds of them, and notifying that many people, a lot of people are gonna be confused and be like, well, why are you changing my, zoning area? I mean, it's gonna throw up a lot of confusion and a lot of phone calls that are unnecessary. I mean, you guys are all mentioning this one person. I mean, there are hundreds of them.
I tend to agree. We're talking, it seems like, and maybe I'm misinterpreting, but it seems like we're having this conversation because there's a concern that 12 years ago, somebody acquired some land, and there's a thought that they should be notified if the zoning is going to be changed because they had a certain plan for use of that 12 years ago. I mean, I don't think anybody can expect that a particular zoning or land use is going to remain in perpetuity without ever changing. But it feels to me like we're hung up on doing this to satisfy the perceived needs of a single landowner. I don't see the necessity if state law dictates that we don't need to do that.
Hey, Rodney, I've got a question about the state law part. It said, did you say 11 parcels or more? Is that per area being like per map, or is that combined with all three? What's the
language is 11 or more contiguous parcels proposed for rezoning. They don't even have to be proposed to be rezoned to one zoning district. It's simply 11 or more contiguous parcels proposed to be rezoned.
Okay, so on map A, there's 11 parcels there?
Yes, yeah, there are more than 11 parcels, 11 or more parcels on each of the maps.
So, because I only count 10 on map A, but does 11 include the one that's already been rezoned? Is that how you get to 11? Because I only count 10 that's on there. I mean, the way the map is, I've got the large one, that's one. I count 10 unless you include the one that's already been special use or rezoned to R2B, then that would be 11 if that counts correct.
You're notifying the 300 foot around that area too. So that's being counted as well, isn't it?
Did you count the triangular parcel at Stirrup and?
That's the 11.
Yeah,
that's the 11.
That section that's included in that is on our zoning map in R5. The rest of that triangular parcel is R2B, but that portion is R5.
Right. So in this case, there are 11 parcels, and that's what the state law requires.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just confused because I'm only counting 10.
I just put dots on each one. I have 11 dots, including that triangular parcel.
Oh, the triangle in the island?
Yep.
Yes.
Surrounded by roads? Oh,
there is a portion of that parcel that is zoned R5 on our zoning map.
okay, okay. All
Is
right.
that a single parcel or is that triangular piece all one parcel?
That property is split zoned. It has two zoning classifications on it.
Okay.
The line runs through the middle of it as you see it there.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate that explanation. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't doing something we weren't supposed to be doing. Just wanted to make sure I understood that properly. Thank you.
On rezoning area B, I counted 87 parcels.
Okay. So we do have a motion on the floor. I do want to ask one quick question of Rodney, I guess. Would it be illegal or unethical for the township to notify this one landowner of what's happening? This one landowner.
Yeah, anytime you're not following the requirements of the state act, you create opportunities for legal trouble. The requirements are specific for related mail notices that if you're mailing notices that you need to mail it to the subject properties and to everyone living within 300 feet or property owners within 300 feet of those subject properties, period. So as I said, if Mr. Beebe wants to let the gentleman know and make him aware that this will be, assuming that this moves forward, it'll be on the Township Board of Trustees agenda. He can even let him know when that's happening. All that is public information.
Mm-hmm.
He can do that, but the township can't. The township, if we're going to proceed with mailed notices, we need to follow the law and mail them to everybody. That's required by the law.
Do you know how long that law has been in place?
Well, the various state zoning acts have been in place since the 1920s. I can't tell you how far back the provisions related to 11 contiguous properties or more go back, but certainly the current zoning act was adopted in 2006. I have a vague recollection, and Chris Dusen, I might have to pick his brain, related to the old Township Zoning Act. I have a vague recollection of something similar in it, but I couldn't quote it for sure.
No, I don't recall. It's been in the act certainly since 2006, and I think it's been in there before that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So to remind everyone, the motion was to recommend to the Township Board that they conduct a second hearing and that they mail out notices to all the affected property owners. And it was moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask Jennifer to call the roll.
Cody,
No.
Squittrito,
No.
Webster,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Darren,
No.
Shingles,
No.
Buckley,
No.
Daring,
Yes.
and LaBelle.
Yes.
Five no, 4 yes.
Okay, motion failed. We're being recorded, so the board will certainly know about our discussion, but the motion failed, so we'll move on. I believe we're ready to move to parcel D. So it's the same format, introduction, public hearing, and deliberation. So turn it over to Rodney.
Thank you. We've already talked about the reason for the B6 change. In this case, we are proposing to rezone 3 lots on the corner at Isabella and Pickard to the B5 district, which is highway business. And that is consistent with the zoning of the adjacent land to the west and north. As we've discussed, the B6 and B5 are both consistent with the master plan, and the districts have similar land uses allowed. We would not be creating any non-conforming uses or structures. And the change is necessary to be consistent with the proposed zoning ordinance. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. So unless, again, there are urgent questions right now, we'll proceed to the public hearing. Same drill. We want to give everyone who wants to speak on this an opportunity to speak. I'll ask the attendees if anyone wants to offer a public comment on this one to hit your raise hand button, and I'll recognize you, and we'll take your comment, and then we'll see if we exhaust everyone's comments, if anyone wants to make an additional comment. So the public hearing on rezone request 20-02 is open at 9:37. I think the other one opened at 8:37, so we're making progress, I guess. So anyone who'd like to make a public comment on this one, go ahead and hit your raise hand button, and I will recognize you. Andy Tyson.
As I watch this discussion go on tonight, it's frustrating because we're holding a digital open house given the circumstances of the pandemic. And I think we're seeing limited participation, obviously, from the public. I want to remind everyone that we're seeing limited participation. So I don't think you could hang your hat on the idea that you've got actual public approval here or consent from the general public. So I think it's important to point that out. Limited participation, and in fact, only the comments that have come by myself and Mr. Beebe have actually been in opposition of several specific items. So I just think it's important to get it on the record that there's no really overwhelming public consent for any of the things being discussed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Going once. Twice. Okay, again, we thank the public for their comments, and they've been so noted for the minutes. And the public hearing on this rezone request is closed at 9:39. And so we're ready to move on to, well, so you've got updates from staff in here. Is there anything else update beyond what you've already said to us?
I don't have anything additional at this time, no.
Okay, so then we'll move on to deliberation. So it's on the floor, open for comments, questions, concerns from commissioners. Perhaps this one is maybe one of the more harmonious ones we've looked at, but let me move back to my panelists here. Doug.
Yeah, just a question for Rodney or Peter. So this one's been separated because the within 300 feet, the property owners were notified. Is that correct?
That is correct. Because it's only 3 parcels, we were required to provide individual mailed notices. And so we set it up as a separate hearing for that reason, a separate area.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? If not, we could have a motion. Again, it's recommend approve, recommend don't approve, and postpone. Alex, did you have a comment or?
Yeah, why not take this to a B7 instead of a B5?
In this case, it's because the properties that are contiguous to it, that surround it, are B5. This area of that intersection is in the B5 zoning district surrounding it. And so the B5, to basically make the zoning uniform on that corner made the best sense. As I said, it does not affect any of the existing uses. They are conforming with the B6. They are conforming with the B5 district, and so it has no effect to simply match the existing zoning of the adjacent property.
Just says in the B7 statement of purpose, the intent of this district is to promote high quality commercial and office in the vicinity of M20 and Pickard Road. Just describes the location of where it's at.
That is true, but there is also B5 zoning there, which is a highway business district.
Right.
As I said, that this is the zoning of the immediately adjacent property.
Right.
So to match it, it made the best sense.
And I didn't ask it during the public hearing, but I'm assuming you've had no written comments from the property owners.
No comments, no written comments. I believe Peter had one person, not a subject property owner, but somebody within 300 feet that called and asked a question just to understand what the purpose of the process was about, and Peter answered the question for him.
Other comments or questions or concerns?
I'd like to make a motion. Motion to recommend to the, I'm sorry?
Ryan? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Motion to recommend to the Township Board of Trustees that PREZ 20-02 zoning map amendment Area D to rezone the 3 lots depicted in the Area D map on the northwest corner of the East Pickard Road and South Isabella Road intersection in the southeast quarter of Section 11 from B6 Auto-Related Highway Business District to B5 Highway Business District be adopted.
Support.
Motion was by Buckley with second by Webster. Further discussion? James?
No.
No? Okay. Any discussion? If not, I'll ask Jennifer, please call the roll.
Shingles,
Yes.
Squatrito,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Daring,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
you're muted.
Yes.
LaBelle,
Yes.
Buckley,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
and Webster.
Yes.
That is 9-0.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're ready to move on to change of pace, different part of the meeting. We've got some site plans. And so the first one is site plan 19-08 Lone Maple Development, the solar energy facility at 5889 East Broadway. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
if I could make a couple of comments, I'm going to bow out of the meeting at this point.
Okay.
And I realize that this might be the last time I have an opportunity to meet with the Planning Commission. And I wanted to compliment the Planning Commission and the staff, Rodney and Peter, working diligently over the last 1.5 or 2 years. I think the result has been a excellent ordinance. I think it meets the needs of the township. And I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you. And certainly in the next, as it gets adopted by the township board, if you have any questions or need any assistance, don't hesitate to call me.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all you've done for us and it's been a pleasure working with you on this project. Maybe you're just naturally optimistic. Have we seen the last of you? I don't know. Only time will tell. But anyway, thanks so much, and we won't make you stay for the remainder of the festivities.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris.
Bye.
Okay. So either, I guess, Rodney or Peter, the introduction on the site plan for Lone Maple.
So yes, this is a solar energy facility for direct use that's being proposed by Lone Maple Development LLC, an existing piece of property on East Broadway Road. This project dates back to early last year. It is the project that triggered a change to our ordinance to insert new provisions related to commercial solar facilities into the current ordinance, which are carried over into the proposed zoning ordinance. So this it involved a text amendment that was adopted about a year ago. And the project itself, unfortunately, as a site plan project, unfortunately got somewhat tangled up in the COVID-19 business. So they had a delay in securing all their outside agency permits and approvals, but they've been working diligently to get that done, and the application is now before you. I guess I can just make a few comments. On page 2 of our report, we have some key findings, and really the key to it is that this project is consistent with our township solar energy systems ordinance, in our zoning ordinance. They have received all necessary outside agency permits and approvals. The site plan conforms with all the other applicable zoning ordinance regulations, including section 12.4 standards for review. So we don't, we find that the project is ready for your review and action. We do have with us Ryan Smith, who is the applicant for this project.
Okay, thank you.
I can. Would you prefer that I promote him to panelist or just unmute him? What's your preference?
You can unmute him. Okay. And so did that, Rodney, that included both your introduction and your any updates from staff?
I suppose, yes. I mean, I can mention the recommendation. We do have, I mean, on the last page of our memo, we do have a recommendation there, and that is just making any action, if you choose to approve it, contingent on the applicant obtaining a building permit, and that would be reviewed by all the local permitting authorities, including the local fire department, for health and safety requirements. So pretty simple condition.
Okay. So yeah, normally at this point, we would give the applicant an opportunity to address the commission, make any comments that they wish to make, and also stand for questions. So Mr. Smith, if you'd like to just tell us what's going on.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I don't have any detailed comments at this moment. As you're aware, I've been before this commission for just about a year and a half working on this project. We did run into some delays with some of the other county departments in receiving our approvals, but as Rodney stated, all of those have been approved, and township staff does see that we meet all the requirements. So I just appreciate your time this evening and taking a look at it and hopefully going forward with the project.
Okay, thank you. And I assume if there are questions, you'll stand for them.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. One question I had, help me out on this. I'm looking at the draft ordinance, the section on solar energy facilities. Did we adopt that verbatim? compared to what in the draft?
Yes, the draft ordinance we adopted.
Okay. So at the very end of it, it's got a section called decommissioning plan. Does he need to have a decommissioning plan?
That would be for, I gotta get the
utility use. Yeah, not for direct use.
Yeah, I don't have all the new verbiage memorized, but yeah, not for the facility that he is using.
Okay, so private or individual facilities don't need that.
So he is using, if he were to be using a facility that would be for off-site energy consumption, that would, but this is for a direct use on-site.
Okay, so yeah, it says it uses the language direct use or primary use. And okay, I see how that's divided. All right. Other questions from commissioners? Nobody's drinking tonight. You're all being very good.
We have seen this many
Oh,
times, so I'd be happy to move the motion. Because we've seen this site plan and we've had many discussions regarding this applicant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I would move to approve the PSPR 19-08 site plan for Lone Maple.
Double Lone Maple there.
Yeah, the Development LLC solar energy facility for direct use on a 3.21 acre parcel number 14-013-20-043-09 at 5889 East Broadway Road, located on the north side of the road in the northeast corner of section 13 and in the B4 general business district, finding that it can comply with applicable zoning ordinance requirements, including section 12.4 standards for review, subject to the following conditions, contingent upon the applicant obtaining a building permit to be reviewed by the local permitting departments, including but not limited to the local fire authority, Mount Pleasant Fire Department, for health and safety requirements.
Is there a second?
Second.
Or
I saw Darren with his hand up first, so we'll go with Darren. So the motion was by Webster, second by Darren, to approve the site plan with the stated conditions. Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask Jennifer to call our roll.
Cody,
Yes.
LaBelle,
Yes.
Squatrito,
Yes.
Daring,
Yes.
Webster,
Yes.
Buckley,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Shingles,
yes.
and Darren.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Enjoy your electricity.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. So we have two more. We have item E, which is site plan review for Helios Rising Outdoor Storage Facility. I love that name. At Venture Way on some vacant property. So introduce us, Rodney.
All right. This is a vacant lot on the north side of Venture Way in the industrial park, off of M20, and the proposal is to improve the vacant parcel to use for an outdoor storage of basically pipeline equipment. Helios Rising is a service company that provides design and installation, inspection, and project management related to the electrical industry and the oil and gas industry, and they're proposing here mainly store piping and other industrial materials on the site. They would propose to secure it within a fence. They're providing a gravel surface for it. They earlier version of the site plan had a proposed building. They have eliminated that. So it was strictly outdoor storage. This is a business that has an office nearby, as noted in there. They have an office location on Enterprise Drive, which is here on the corner. And it is a land use that is envisioned as permitted use in the I-2 General Industrial District, basically subject to site plan approval. You have our report dated July the 10th, and so I'm happy to go through the details of that when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. So I believe this comes out of Mr. Beebe's shop, is that right?
That is correct. He's unmuted.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to you if there's anything you'd like to specifically say about this.
Peter had gotten a hold of, first, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Peter had gotten a hold of me. There was a email sent to his office in regards to the sidewalk waiver. We had stated on the drawing, we were requesting a waiver, but we didn't say what reasons. The security fence was proposed to be a chain link all the way around. There needs to be screening on the north side. We will change that portion along the north side to an opaque fencing, and the dumpster will be enclosed with the same material so that they're matching. That I think, other than, I think the grading permit is required because there is no building and there is no building permit. So we have to go through the grading procedure instead of through site plan. I think that is it, gentlemen.
Okay.
Ladies, I'm sorry.
So the letter that Tim is referring to was dropped into your email, but it was done very late in the day. I'm going to share my screen here. This is, can everybody see the letter?
Not yet.
Oh,
There
we go.
No.
I see.
okay. So this is the letter that Mr. Beebe sent related to the sidewalk waiver. He refers to it as sidewalk waiver. The actual action is a temporary relief from the requirement to construct the sidewalk, public sidewalk. For those that may have trouble seeing it, he notes as a reason for requesting this temporary relief is that the parcel lies within the industrial district and there is less than 50% of the parcels within a half mile that have sidewalks. There are no sidewalks in Venture Way and there are no sidewalks on Broadway east of the overpass. And there are no sidewalks along Somerton Road between M20 and Broadway. So that's the reason he gives for requesting the temporary relief from construction of a public sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'll open this up to commissioners. If there are any questions for Mr. Beebe or questions for township staff, any questions or comments on the plan? So I guess I'll be ignorant here. Mostly what I see on this is gravel and then construction of the drainage system. Am I missing anything? Is that really what I'm looking at here?
Yeah, that's exactly what you're looking at. It's a layout yard, and we're required to follow the stormwater ordinance. So there's the drainage of the parking lot to keep it dry so that it can be used for storage. And then there's the detention area in front. I do know that there was today a letter sent to Peter from DPW that said they didn't see the water and sewer leads. We're not proposing any as the building's being taken off.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in your report or write-up, you are suggesting that if we go ahead and approve this, that the changes with respect to the fencing and something else will just be staff approval. Is that accurate?
That is the gist of our report. We did note in it, as was mentioned, that as Tim mentioned, that there are a number of items missing, the sidewalk waiver or temporary relief request details were missing. Tim provided those in the letter. We'd like to have that on the site plan. So it's clear to any future person reviewing the site plan that what happened and why. The dumpster details are missing, the security fence details and the obscuring fence details are all missing. Tim has addressed those and said he would provide them. So if you're comfortable, one option would be to grant a conditional approval subject to an administrative review to make sure that these items are actually addressed on a revised site plan. We have done that for some projects in the past where a revised site plan with those similar types of details are taken care of and submitted with the building permit application. And so Peter would review it at the same time he's looking at a building permit. In this case, it could be done at the same time as the application.
Okay.
Now, you also have the option, if you wish, to if you feel it necessary, to ask for revisions and to have another opportunity to review it yourself, and that's certainly completely appropriate to do. If you choose to go down that road, then obviously a postponing action would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I'd ask Denise, put her on the spot. The waiver or the postponement of the sidewalks, do they qualify based on your understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do. I would recommend that the Planning Commission provide the temporary relief. And not use the word waiver, and I appreciate not using the word waiver. We have to really get into this temporary relief because, again, if something changes, they would be required to put sidewalks in.
Right.
So in the draft motion template, the conditional approval item, you'll note that there are two number 4s. And so basically, if you on that, the first number 4 is if you were to require the sidewalk to be installed. And then the second number 4 is basically giving the written relief, and you'll want to fill in the reason that you're providing the relief as part of that condition.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, we can have a motion. Someone brave other than Denise or Ryan wants to make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
To approve SPSPR 20-3 site plan for Helios Rising Outdoor Storage on a 2.88 acre parcel number 14 152-00-007-00 at 5697 Venture Way, located on the north side of Venture Way in the northeast quarter of Section 13 and in the I-2 General Business District, finding that it can comply with the applicable zoning ordinance requirements, including Section 12.4 standard review, subject to the following conditions. I'm going to modify some of the conditions because they don't need utility locations, because there is none. I'm going to jump down to number 2. The detail of the proposed dumpster enclosure shall be added to the reviewed site plan for review and acceptance by the zoning administrator prior to issuance of any grading permit for the project. details of the obscuring wall and fence along the north lot boundary and the security fence for the remainder of the lot shall be added to the revised site plan for review and acceptance by the zoning administrator prior to issuance of any grading permit for the project. I'm going to scratch the first number 4. And the applicant's written request for temporary relief from the requirement for sidewalk construction is granted for the following reason. I have to switch to this here. The parcel lies within an industrial district that has less than 50% of the parcels within a half mile that have sidewalk.
Is there a second to the motion?
Support.
I believe that was LaBelle, is that correct?
Yes, I think Buckley and I about the same time.
Okay, we'll give it
You
to
can have
LaBelle.
it.
So motion was by Fuller with second by LaBelle to approve this site plan with the stated conditions. Further discussion? Not? Call the roll.
Webster,
Yes.
Shingles,
Yes.
Darian,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Buckley,
Yes.
Squatrito,
Yes.
LaBelle,
Yes.
and Darren.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Great, thank you.
Just a quick question for Commissioner Webster. Is the term for the relief provisional relief or is it temporary relief?
It's either provision, those are synonymous terms. If you would look at the sidewalk and pathways recommendation, we define the temporary. It's defined within that document.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm trying to see if I have it. Just a second here. I'll see if I have it.
The world has stopped pending this clarification.
It's not that big a deal. I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
that terminology, right? I just remember you mentioning provisional relief when all this was being changed away from waiver. So I just wanted to make sure. Looking for clarity.
Well, again, I found it right here. Well, we use the word, it's almost used interchangeably, but again, provisional could be fine. And we define provisional is a definition in the ordinance of March 12, 2018, provided for the time being granted of relief is subject to later alteration. So if something changes, if sidewalks come into that area that meets the 50%, or there's a death, again, a pedestrian death is one, is that provisional or temporary, again, you could probably use either word, is we would as a planning commission go back and say, oh, you now have to build a sidewalk in that area which you have noted in your site plan. So that's why we ask for it in a site plan. And then we come back and say, okay, we'll give you that relief.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I completely in support of that. Just more looking for the clarification on which terminology you're preferring, or if they're interchangeable, then that's fine too.
Well, I think we use the word, if you look in the document, I think we use the word provisional more
Okay.
than we use temporary.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay.
And when people get provisional relief from the sidewalks, it also involves dropping a golf ball.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Whereas temporary relief does not. All right. So we've got, I don't, why is this other one listed under other business as opposed to just under new business? Have we seen this before? No, item
Yeah,
site plan review 20-07.
declares came in front of you before they purchased the property.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I did not remember that, but anyway. All right, so we'll move on to site plan review 20-07. Declare office/warehouse/outdoor storage facility site plan, address 4991 East River Road. Introduction, please.
Thank you. This is to propose site plan to relocate an existing business, Dennis Clare's dumpster service business, onto the property on River Road. This is property that is zoned I-1 light industrial, and the use is a permitted use in the district subject to site plan approval. He is proposing to have his office have indoor storage space as well as outdoor storage space on the property. There is some existing facilities there, but he's proposing to add and update that. As Tim mentioned, this property was before for kind of a preliminary look, and it's come back now at this point ready for to proceed forward with a site plan action. We did have, unfortunately, a bit of confusion that led to an ordinance enforcement issue, and that they started working on the property, doing some grading work without site plan approval, and we had to put a stop work order on that. They promptly responded and stopped the work, and now are simply waiting to have the site plan action taken care of, and then before they pick that up and move forward. I guess a few of the details. There are a couple of items missing from the plan, or really one item, and that is that there's no information about parking on the site. The ordinance requires has certain parking calculations that need to be made based on the proposed use, and also the parking facilities themselves do need to be shown on the site plan. Also, we would note that there are two existing parcels there that would need to be combined before a building permit could be issued. They do not need to be combined before site plan approval, but they do need to be combined before construction permits are allowed. The same issue applies to this property that applied to the Helios Rising, in that they show a public sidewalk along River Road and have a note on there about waiver requested, but no details were provided. So here again, Mr. Beebe provided a letter today that I'll share in a moment. It's in your email. In fact, I'll just go ahead and share it here. So you have it. To the right screen. So this is the letter that Mr. Beebe provided, and essentially notes similar reasons for proposing to requesting a temporary relief from the requirement for the public sidewalk, and that is that the parcel lies with the industrial district, and there's less than 50% of the parcels within a half mile that have sidewalks. There are no sidewalks in East River Road from Mission Road to Isabella Road, and there are no sidewalks along Industrial Avenue in the nearby industrial park. So that's the reason he states. And similar to Helios Rising, we would want to see that included on the site plan. And so our recommendations reflect that as a condition, potential conditional approval. The only other note I would have with this is that we noted after the packets were sent out that we left off the sidewalk condition inadvertently. I left, and there's no we to it. I left off the sidewalk condition on the motion template. And so I did send out a revised motion template that has that same choice related to sidewalks as a Helios Rising project did. I can share it on the screen if you need, or you can use the Helios Rising motion template for that element if you wish. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So I'm assuming Mr. Beebe is speaking on this one as well. So once again, anything else you'd like to say to us about this this project?
Same comment as on Helios, the water and sewer connections. We're not proposing any to the building. This is a facility to sort recycled materials, and they're not requesting any water and sewer. As far as the parking, Peter had talked to me in regards to the parking. The existing parking that is in and around the building that they use as an office is the parking that will be utilized. I'll make sure that it's striped and shown so that he can do a parking count.
And the buildings are just very basic metal, sheet metal buildings?
Yes, yes, they are.
So that's why you didn't bother with a nice, pretty elevation diagram. I mean, I see the last pages. I've never seen one like this. It's like almost like the instructions for putting it together.
Yep, that's what was supplied by the builder.
Okay. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Would the proposed future building require its own site plan then, or would it be grandfathered into this?
There are no details for the proposed future building, so I think we would expect that would come in under a separate site plan approval.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I'd like to make a motion to approve PSPR 20-07, site plan for Declare Office Warehouse Outdoor Storage Facility on approximately 30 acres. Parcel number is 14-002-30-013-02 and 03 at 4425 and 4491 East River Road, located on the north side of the road, west of US 127 in the southwest quarter, Section 2, and in the I-1 Light Industrial District, finding that it can comply with applicable zoning ordinance requirements, including Section 12.4 standards for review, subject to the following conditions. There will be no utilities, so disregard number 1. Number 2, parking locations and required parking calculations shall be added to a revised site plan for review and acceptance by the zoning administrator prior to issuance of any building permit for the project. Applicant shall submit a land combination application to the township, which shall be approved by the township assessing department prior to issuance of any building permit for the project. And the temporary relief from the sidewalk. The parcel lies within an industrial district, and there is less than 50% of parcels within a half mile of that may have sidewalks.
Is there
Support. I'll support.
Okay, so the motion was by LaBelle and the second was by Webster. Further discussion? Please poll us.
LaBelle,
Yes.
Faring,
Yes.
Buckley,
Yes.
Shingles,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Webster,
Yes.
Squatrito,
Yes.
and Cody.
Yes.
That motion carries 9-0.
Thank you. So we've moved through our business items. So all we have left are extended public comment. So at this point, if there's anyone who would like to address the Planning Commission on any item, whether it was on tonight's agenda or not, they are invited to do so at this time. And we just ask them to limit their comments to 5 minutes. Extended public comment is open at 10:21. And Mr. Beebe.
He is unmuted.
Okay. Question, is the stormwater ordinance part of the overall zoning ordinance that's being adopted?
No, the stormwater ordinance is a separate regulatory ordinance. There's a reference in the proposed ordinance to that separate regulatory ordinance, but there are no additional standards in. Let me clarify. The original March 5th draft document, the book, had some additional standards in it related to stormwater management. The Planning Commission identified that as something they were concerned about. And so as part of the additional revisions and corrections that the Planning Commission recommended to the Board of Trustees, the stormwater management section of the zoning ordinance was changed to simply reference the separate regulatory ordinance without having any additional requirements.
Okay. The only reason I bring it up is there was a committee put together 3 or 4 years ago. The Drain Commission, Chippewa Township, City, Union Township, myself, and an ordinance was written to be adopted by those entities. And I don't think you got into that yet, and I was just curious if it was part of the zoning ordinance.
I can tell you that it's on our list to look at, but we won't be looking at it till after this particular project is done. Certainly, the current stormwater management ordinance has been around a long time, and I was aware of the committee that the work that was done. I don't have a copy of that draft ordinance, but I'm sure Peter does. But as I said, that's a project that we'll be looking at for probably in the coming year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? If not, we'll go ahead and close public comment at 10:24. Thank the public for their comments. Next item is final board comment. I guess I just want to ask Rodney briefly, you sent us an email, I think it was also today, about this thing on Thursday. Just very briefly, what's going to happen at that and how critical is it that we be there?
Oh, it's simply for your interest. This is what we have on Thursday. The Public Services Department hired a consultant to do a review of the cost of providing water and sewer services in the township. One of the reasons for this is to look at the rates and determine whether the rates are correct, or they need to be adjusted one way or the other. And also to look at any other issues related to cost of services for these utility services. So the consultant has been working on that for some time. They have prepared a report, and on Thursday evening at 6 o'clock, the consultant will be making a presentation. They've allotted about an hour and a half, and I suspect a substantial portion of that is intended for question and answer. Just to kind of summarize their findings and recommendations. You are certainly welcome to attend. It's not a requirement that you attend. Obviously, utilities are an important component of what we do from a land use planning perspective and land development perspective. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about this particular element of utilities, you're certainly welcome to participate. I understand that Mark Stuhldreher has asked the consultant to record it, and with the idea that we would make it available on the township's YouTube channel for later viewing. So assuming that can be done, it would be available to you at a later time, and I can certainly provide that link for anybody that would like to see it.
Okay. Will the written report also be available?
The written report will ultimately be going to the Board of Trustees, and yes, it will be available. I don't even have a copy at the moment.
So it'll appear in one of their packets at some point.
It will, yes. It will be. It's definitely a public document.
Okay. Other board comments?
Yeah, I'd love a copy of something or a link to that recording because Commissioner Therian and I both have board of review from 5:30 to 8:30 that evening, so we won't be able to tune in for that Zoom meeting.
Okay.
I would like it as well. Thank you.
So
I'd like the invite to that meeting.
The invite is in your email. It was sent out to you. So
I didn't get it.
okay, I'll resend it.
It's on the homepage of the Union Township website as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, Mike, I'll bet I had your old email address on that set, so I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you.
Is board of review on Zoom?
I
Something
don't,
electronic, or is it in person?
that's a good question.
It's in person. Well, I'm sorry. I think Doug and we'll be meeting at the township. The idea is to have everything done via a letter.
Oh, that's right. I saw that.
I do believe if somebody really wanted to, they could come in, but I don't know that that's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sure. If somebody's scheduled to come in or not.
Okay. Any other comments from board members?
I have two things. In regards to what Commissioner LaBelle talked about in regards to the wording for the sidewalks, I would recommend that we use the word provisional, since that is what's noted in the March 12th document. So provisional probably is a better word to use, and we can be consistent. And then the second thing is, I don't think I'm the vice chair of this committee. I'm looking at the board expiration dates that is provided to us, and I'm listed as the vice chair. I don't believe I'm the vice chair any longer.
Yeah, who did we
I don't think I was voted as
Ryan?
vice.
Did we elect Ryan as the vice chair?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So that probably needs to be updated.
Okay, yeah.
Ryan wasn't going to say anything.
I was trying to get unmuted, but you guys caught me.
All right.
We can just look back in the minutes. We'll find it.
Anything else? All right, well, I commend everyone for their fortitude tonight, and I think we've completed our agenda, so we'll stand adjourned until our August meeting. When will when does the board take up the zoning ordinance?
We'll send it to the county. The county next has a meeting in early August. And so it will go to the Board of Trustees after that, probably the second board meeting in August, I would suspect. It could be on the board agenda for a first reading.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good night. Thank you very much.
Thanks.